have the standard chairperson's statement to read out. So all visitors must sign into the visitor book at the entrance at Kilncraigs. So this includes council staff from other buildings. There is no planned fire evacuation drill or alarm test today. If the fire alarm is activated during your visit, you must exit the building immediately. And council officers will direct you to the nearest fire exit and will escort visitors to the building fire assembly point beside the Silver Man at the top of Parliamentary Walk. Kilncraig staff should report to their floor's assembly point. You should remain at your assembly point until directed to reoccupy the building and only re-enter once the fire marshal has advised it's safe to do so. Please do not attempt to leave the site by vehicle until cleared to do so by the fire marshal to ensure access routes are kept clear for emergency vehicles. Please note that this is a public meeting and that members of the public may be in attendance. The meeting will be recorded by the clerk and published online for public viewing. The taking of photographs, including screenshots, audio or video recordings, are not permitted during the meeting unless with express permission of the convener. I've had no such requests. Can members attending virtually activate their cameras if possible to enable you to join by video? And can all attendees mute their microphones when not speaking? Please do not come in during items unless I invite you to do so. If members attending virtually wish to speak on any point, please indicate by clicking on the raise your hand button. Members in the chamber should also raise their hand. I will bring you in at an appropriate time. If members have not been able to access all papers for the meeting, please indicate now. Today we will hear each item set out in the agenda. I will invite the officer to present the paper and members will then have the opportunity to ask questions before we proceed to debate and decision. I will now ask the clerk to take the roll call to confirm attendance at this meeting and would ask that members indicate if they wish to declare an interest. I'll take the declaration of interest after the roll call.
Thanks, Chair. So everybody is in attendance. We've got apologies from Councillor Fairley, Councillor McCluckie, Councillor Keogh and Councillor McTaggart.
Thank you. I'd just like to highlight that as a result of a recent communication received from Sauchie Public Hall Skeoch, with a deadline for legals to be completed on the licence no later than the 30th May 2025, I have allowed the motion by Councillor Forson to be presented at Council today. And I'll take that motion at the end of the other motions that are on your agenda. Are there any declarations of interest on the agenda items today? I don't see any hands raised. I'll proceed with the first item. So the first item is item 3A, page 7, the previous meeting of Clacks Council held on the 20th March 2025. Are there any comments in terms of matters of accuracy on page 7, page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I take it that's agreed as a correct minute of the meeting. That's affirmed by those present. Item 3B, page 15, the meeting of the Petitions Committee held on the 3rd of April 2025. If there are any points of accuracy on page 15, page 16, page 17, and page 18. Is that agreed as a correct minute? Thank you. Moving on to formal item 4. Committee recommendations referred to the Council, both from the Petitions Committee and Audit and Scrutiny. Nikki, our Chief Executive, is going to speak to this paper. Nikki?
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, councillors. I'm sorry that I'm not there with you in person this morning. So this report seeks council approval for recommendations made by 2 committees which have taken place since the last meeting of council in March. The 2 meetings are, as the Provost just said, the Petitions Committee, which met on the 3rd of April, and the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, which met on the 17th of April. The Petitions Committee considers a submission in respect of the Tillicoultry Rack homeowners. There are 4 recommendations set out for Council, and these are detailed at paragraph 2.1 of the report. There is also 1 recommendation to Council arising from the Audit and Scrutiny meeting in respect of the 2024 staff survey paper. The Council report includes links to the reports submitted to each of these committees. I'm very happy to take any questions on the paper.
Any questions to Nikki? Dennis, Councillor Coyne, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Nikki, just on 2.1 onwards, just wonder if there's any updates on those actions at all, those things that we agreed to progress with. The recommendations at 2.11 following.
Thanks very much, Councillor. I'll bring Kevin in to provide the update on those actions. Thanks, Kevin, for coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Coyne. In terms of the actions that were set within the Petitions Committee, officers have commenced some background work around about this, but we require approval by Council in terms of the actions themselves before we can actually complete some of these tasks. We require Council's approval today, but officers in preparation for these actions, some of which would be actions that we would be progressing anyway in terms of our work with the RAC owners groups, has commenced already and made exploratory engagements with some of the other professional bodies in reference to some of the points contained within the paper.
Fine.
Are there any further questions? I don't see any hands up, so Ellen, Councillor Forson, do you want to move the paper?
Yeah, formally move.
And Councillor Lindsay?
Yeah, that's second.
If there are no other motions, is that the 2 items agreed? I'll just quickly summarise that. So, Council agrees that a feasibility study for both pre and post RAC evaluations are carried out. Council agrees to explore all avenues within existing frameworks to provide support in whatever form that takes. That will not proceed with a public inquiry at this particular point in time, and that the Council actively and more visibly lobby the Scottish Government and UK Government when looking at national support, and that we agree to move the biannual survey for the Audit and Scrutiny Committee. So we've agreed item 4, moving on to item 5, page 23, Be the Future update, Clackmannanshire and Falkirk collaboration work. Again, Nikki, the Chief Executive, is speaking to this paper.
Thanks very much, Provost. So this report provides Council's regular update on the Be the Future target operating model and associated transformation programme. This paper sets out the standing updates on the Council's agreed top 3 themes of digital and data transformation, workforce strategy and asset management strategy, incorporating the refresh of the Council's learning estate strategy. There is a huge amount of work being advanced under the digital and data transformation theme, much of which is at an advanced stage of development or implementation. This work is critical work to improve our efficiency and effectiveness, as well as transforming our processes and practice and helping to deliver a consistent, enhanced and positive customer experience. It's hard to convey the full progress, potential and level of opportunity that this work is now delivering in a single report. Therefore, I've agreed with the Chair that the next Be the Future Board on the 22nd of May will be given over to the exciting work being advanced in respect of data insights. The Chair has extended an open invitation to all councillors previously at the Be the Future Board, so I hope that some of you are able to attend to see the presentation. Significant work is also being advanced in respect of the development of the asset management strategy and parallel work on the refresh of the learning estate strategy. Many public sector bodies are looking to optimise their asset management strategies given the challenging operating environment, as well as creating a catalyst for potential collaboration and to drive innovation in models of delivery, such as we have secured through the Police Scotland co-location and the embedding of the Strive approach. Finally, the report provides an update on the collaboration work, which is currently being taken forward with Falkirk Council. There's been a lot of work and engagement with strategic and operational teams across both councils as part of this discovery phase. Essentially, the discovery phase seeks to answer the question, is there merit or potential opportunity for both partners in taking forward collaborative models? If so, what might these opportunities look like? Paragraph 4.4 sets out the three-tier range of options, which is providing the spine for the work during the delivery phase. The self-sustaining option is basically the baseline and seeks to establish the extent to which existing plans and activity allow the council to be self-sustaining from both a financial and service delivery perspective. The two further options reflect varying degrees of potential opportunities for collaboration. These options are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Given we are using a consultant to undertake this work, in the programme board, the Chief Executive of Falkirk Council and I have been keen to stress that we anticipate a degree of challenge to our self-assessment against these potential options. This is important so that once we present the outcome and potential options to Council, there has been expert scrutiny and challenge of the potential opportunity to assist us in clearly stating the potential benefits and risks, as well as to have the benefit of learning from others. The work is progressing well, with positive engagement and relationships already evident. We are anticipating a report to each council in October 2025. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thank you, Nicky. Are there any questions? Jane, Councillor Rennie.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay. The first one really is on the primary school learning estate. It's really good to see that that's going to be commencing in summer. And I just wondered what the potential timescales were for completion for that.
I think Kevin will come in on that, Councillor Rennie.
You convener, and thank you, Councillor. In terms of the work, so we're commencing some of the repair works in terms of the 5 identified primary schools over the summer period. The plan is for that to hopefully come to a conclusion shortly after the summer period in terms of the major works involved. We're working with education colleagues in terms of planning that and in terms of the delivery of that so that there's minimal impact on any of our establishments. And obviously that work is informing our developments within the learning estate strategy, of which people will come back to Council in the autumn, as previously reported.
Second question's on the Falkirk scenario. I just wondered, in view of the fact that Falkirk's budgets are probably just as tense as ours,
Kevin, it might be useful if you just stay there just now.
if not potentially worse in terms of the Falkirk budget position, and I just wondered if that could potentially be a risk to Clackmannanshire Council, or if that's all be considered in terms of, I mean, I noticed within the document it talked about budget pressures for both councils, and I just wondered if that was potentially a risk with Falkirk being not in as you know, probably, like I said, in a worse position than ourselves.
Nicky, do you want to field that question?
Yes, thank you, Provost. So I suppose the part of the baselining work shows quite clearly pretty well what Councillor Rennie's saying in terms of there is a similarly proportionate level of challenge in terms of the financial challenge to both councils. So the size of the challenge is roughly in proportion in each council area. The purpose of the work is actually to look at are the potential solutions to help mitigate some of that risk by working together and or working with others, because I think obviously whilst we've started the work just with one council, the idea might be through looking at either the mixed economy model or potentially regional models for delivery of services, that there may well be other partners that would also come in that would improve the economies of scale and help us to reduce the costs on a collective basis as we move forward, as well as hopefully improve service quality or protect service quality where that's needed.
Is that all your questions, Jim? Okay, Scott, Councillor Harrison. Sorry, Kevin, I kept you back there. I think just
It's probably just as well. I've got a question on the property asset management strategy. How do we, or is there a way that we can ensure that, so if we set aside the community asset transfer and look at commercial, is there a way that we can ensure that if we transfer assets on a commercial basis that they're used properly, they don't become an asset around our county that falls into disrepair, is not used? Is there something that we can do to kind of prevent that happening? Because I see it a lot at the moment.
Through you, Chair. I may bring in my colleague through because I get the sense that this is verging into legal territory. However, there are aspects in terms of some of the options that are available to us. If there is a discount, for example, applied to the sale, even in commercial elements, there's ability to put in clawback clauses, etc. in that sense. And there's probably other mechanisms through other regulatory options that are available to us to address particular issues, but it would be dependent on the issues that arose. I'm going to defer, Chair, if that's okay, to my colleague. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Kevin. So there's a number of ways that you can protect the assets. With leases, there's full repairing clauses that we put into leases. It's basically about making sure that the council deals with the management of those, carrying out regular inspections, serving schedule of dilapidations where we see that there's obligations on a tenant to repair a property. There's loads of stuff in terms of leasing. In terms of disposals, Kevin's right, there's clawback agreements we can put in place. Depends on the discount. We've got to be mindful of that. And yeah, I think there's lots of options, and it's maybe one that we can actually explore together and perhaps bring something even back to council in relation to options available that they can decide in terms of procedure, how we go with, to give us some guidance as well. More than happy to do that. Kevin?
I think in terms of that is certainly something I'm more than happy to incorporate within the asset management strategy, so we're incorporating it in as part of that wider strategic objective. It's certainly something we're working on at the present time with that plan of bringing the strategy to council in the autumn.
Thanks.
I believe the Chief Executive has come in as well, Nikki.
Thanks very much, Provost. The other thing I would say is just to remind us that some years back we did actually look at establishing a kind of protocol for the conditions that need to pertain for, say, a community asset transfer to progress. It may well be that we look to refresh or revisit some of that just to set out the preconditions, because there's a preventative element, potentially making sure that those issues are dealt with up front, and that in transferring any asset, we're very clear about the condition of the asset when it transfers, and also the responsibilities and liabilities as they go forward through the legal options that Lee was describing just there. So I think we can have and we already do have quite a structured approach to that, but it may be, given that there's been more community asset transfers and potentially more in the pipeline, we can look to revisit that.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any further questions from members? I'm having a memory. It's okay. Kathleen, sorry. Councillor Martin.
I'm shocked and right, on page 24, the social work IT management system. I noticed there's additional works going on here to future-proof it and, further realise the benefits going forward. Now, we've waited quite a long time for this. Have you got a time frame in mind, that this will be operational and integrated properly?
I think Lorraine's going to answer this one.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Martin. So the work that we've been undertaking at the moment is very detailed. Wendy Robertson's on the call or not, but Wendy's been leading that work to really be absolutely crystal clear of what our requirements are. And I think that's probably a piece of work that hadn't been done previously, so we're in a better place when we actually go out to procurement. We are hoping to bring a paper back to council, next council in June, which will give you an update on that process, which will then allow us potentially to move to procurement and then move into the stage of purchase and then into implementation. So we're moving much further forward now than we have done before, but we're still probably a couple of years away from having something fully established in the council. It'll be a gradual process of implementation, but we're still a wee bit away from actually going through all the legal stages, the procurement required to get to that point. But it's certainly moving and has moved considerably in the last few months under Wendy's support. Wendy, I don't know, Chair, if you would allow, if Wendy wants to come in and expand a bit on that.
Wendy.
Yeah, so just going to say for 3 months from December, we undertook a detailed, I suppose, discovery piece of work across all service areas: children's justice, adults, children's, educational psychology, looking at a detailed core statement of requirements that will be the basis for the procurement documentation. It was 131 pages. It goes into extreme detail to capture our specific requirements for this system. On the back of that, we're looking at how we can kind of reimagine kind of social care and maximise the opportunity of this new case management system, and working together with the services. That piece of work is coming to an end, and we will present this to Council at the end of June. As Lorraine said, this is a huge piece of work to implement a new system, and looking at comparative systems, it usually takes about 12 to 18 months to implement, but there will be preparatory works that need to be undertaken in terms of data cleansing, etc. And we're working with the services to work towards that in the interim.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen, Lorraine and Wendy. League, Darren, sorry, Councillor Lee.
You've been making that same mistake for the last 8 years. No, that's all right, it's fine. It's fine. Page 24, 3.4. Can I ask if there's a plan to, or can I request that paper is brought forward for the Smart Clacks project? So that's about the damp and mould sensor and reporting software pilot that we're about to launch. I was in a housing briefing the other day, and I'm imagining many members around the table get issues with constituents reporting issues with the properties with mould, damp, health concerns that go along with that, and it's a very thorny issue. So I'm just wondering if there is a plan to, or can I request that a paper is brought forward to inform members on this?
Yeah.
It's going to be a paper.
Right.
Any other questions?
I've got a follow-up question. So I think Nicky was wanting to speak further.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Lee. I was just going to make the point that actually you raise an interesting point, and it was something that I was very mindful of this time. We've got an awful lot of work, and there's been a lot of investment, as you know, in a number of the digital tools and the digital transformation piece. I think there are potentially a number of developments that might be of interest, and I think I'm happy to look at a paper, but I think I need to look more generally to think about how we get a bit more sightedness on some of this, because there's some excellent work going on in that space. I mentioned the briefing session that we're going to do through the Be the Future board on the data insights, but I think specifically, as you say, there'll be service specific developments as well that you're interested in. So I'll have a think about how we deal that. It may be a combination of briefing and or papers, councils, if that's right, if that's okay.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great, thanks.
Just can I hold you there? Wendy, do you want to come in very quickly?
Yes, I was just going to add that at the Be the Future board on the 22nd of May, we will have the kind of presentation in terms of the data and insights work, but there will also be a talk through and a presentation of the roadmap for digital and transformation for 25-26, which will cover not only Smart Clacks, but the other digital initiatives.
Okay, thanks, Wendy. Darren?
Yes, I'm looking for a bit of information of who's ultimately responsible for the ITification of certain processes that were previously done via paper. I've had a lot of feedback, particularly from the taxi and private hire forum, about the processes they go through to apply for licences and servicing their vehicles. And I'm really just wanting to take those concerns to somebody direct rather than go through the council inquiries process, which is a bit clunky at the moment.
Nicky, are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I'd suggest that if you just direct that to me, Councillor Lee, in the first instance, and I'll make sure that once I see the detail of the inquiry, I can direct it accordingly. I think generally what I would say in terms of there are a number of areas where we're looking at automation for processes. And that is being, we've developed a pipeline of projects that's run through the team with Alison and Luke, along with Wendy. So you've got that link between transformation and IT. So depending on the specific questions, I'll direct it accordingly.
Thanks, Darren. Dennis, Councillor Coyne, sorry.
Yeah, pardon me. Yeah, page 27, 4.8. I'm just wondering what if there's an update available on the bid, the joint bid with Falkirk Council to the Investor Save Fund.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. It's an interesting one because initially, I think you'll recall, we were expecting quite a quick turnaround on the outcome from the submission of those bids. We've not had any formal feedback as yet. We understand that the bids have got as far as ministers, but we're still awaiting on the outcome of that process. But I will make sure that once we know, excuse me, that's communicated. Excuse me.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that. And any further questions? No, just ask Ellen, Councillor Forson, to move the paper.
Yep, happy to propose the latest update of the Be the Future programme. I would kind of reiterate the invite I put out to all members to attend the Be the Future board, even if you don't attend it, and we do make sure that all the papers are issued to all members. There is so much information in all those papers, particularly in relation to the City Deal progress, the progress in the digital transformation, and lots of work. So it's probably good for everybody to make sure they had a wee kind of read through them. But again, please feel free to come along to the board as an observer. And I think, as the Chief Exec says, it probably is a good idea that we maybe hold some briefings, particularly when there's progress being made in a lot of areas. In proposing the paper today, I wanted to focus particularly on the collaborative work that we're progressing with Falkirk Council. I think this is a partnership that reflects our ambition to transform services, but crucially to strengthen the sustainability in face of ongoing financial pressures throughout the public sector. And as set out in the Budget Outlook paper agreed in February, we're progressing what we're calling the discovery phase with Falkirk to explore future transformation opportunities. And it's a key strand of our target operating model, really focusing on finding sustainable, effective ways of delivering services and doing so through partnership where it adds value. So I think, as the Chief Exec said and is outlined in the paper, there's a lot of work underway, and just outlining a few key activities. There was a workshop involving both the Council's Chief Executive and Directors. There's been extensive service-led sessions between professional peers across the councils, and there's been detailed data analysis which should help us understand where the opportunities and the pressures lie. We're exploring 3 broad delivery models. So that's a self-sustaining model, which is the council's focusing on our current arrangements, the mixed economy model, which is combining and sharing distinct services, but also a regional model combining integrated management but with local delivery, which I think is absolutely key for us. And I want to stress that these models are not decisions. They're models, are structured frameworks to help us weigh up costs, the benefits and the feasibility. And the work is, again, I would say, focused on service resilience, long-term sustainability and supporting our financial strategy. I think, crucially, communication with staff has to be a cornerstone of the process. We've already run what's called as-is and to-be workshops involving employees across the services, and hopefully giving staff a real voice in shaping ideas and identifying what future transformation might look like. And I think that ongoing staff engagement is going to be really key throughout the process, and we need to make sure our internal communications are spot on, because that's going to be crucial to ensure the work is not being done to people but with people. We're expecting a draft report on the discovery phase at some point, hopefully later this month, and a final version before the summer. Then there'll be councillor engagement and a full report coming to council in hopefully October. As has been outlined in the report, a joint bid has been submitted to the Scottish Government's Invest to Save Fund. That's really seeking support to help us move on with any recommendations that might come out of the report. I do understand that it's been looked on favourably. This work has been seen as quite innovative and sector leading, so I'm hoping for a favourable outcome, but you know, with government decisions you can just never be too sure. So I think there's a lot of progress being made, so I'd invite the council to note and support the continued work being done by the Be the Future Board, and again just extend that invitation to anyone interested to come along and hear more of the work that's been going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Lindsay.
Thanks, Provost. Just to build on the council leader, I think I'd welcome the update and the progress that's ongoing across the priority areas outlined in the paper. The range of digital service developments that are progressing at pace across different portfolios. In particular, I suppose, in relation to the portfolio I oversee, we've already discussed the social work IT system, and it's good to see progress, dare I say, at pace, because it is happening at pace. However, it is recognised that it will take some time for it to be operational, but certainly, you know, over my time, and I know it's extended before, previous to my time as well, this is a priority that has been there on the table for quite some time. So, as I say, it's great to see that progress, and hopefully we can see further progress to make sure we've got a fit-for-purpose system that works for our most vulnerable across Clackmannanshire. There's obviously the new school enrolments application, which will make life a lot easier for enrolling young children and young people, for respective parents and carers as well. So lots of progress in there, and the paper outlines all the additional digital transformations that are going ahead. Also, in terms of the people portfolio and in relation to the asset management strategy, there's obviously the progress and work around the learning estate strategy. And again, we've had some further dialogue on that in terms of timescales. So we're hoping for further detail to be produced in the autumn, as we say, and we've been directly involved in that, both as a spokesperson and as an administration, to shape the direction of travel with regards to the learning estate. Obviously, it's a hefty piece of work in amongst a huge wider asset management strategy, but it will stand alone, and it does need to stand alone, and it needs to be effective both for our young people, modern education and net zero aspirations that we have, and it needs to be efficient for the council going forward. So lots of work and lots of discussion to go ahead, and involvement of committees within that work as well going forward. Like the council leader, pleased to see that dialogue and work progressing with our neighbours to look at how we best collaborate to deliver most effective and efficient services for our communities. As outlined in the paper and as outlined by the council leader, there's a range of different delivery models that have been investigated and discussed, and as the chief executive's outlined as well, wider partners that we need to, and stakeholders and investors that we need to be working alongside as well to make sure we get the best deal possible for Clackmannanshire. So I'll leave it at that for now and invite debate.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Anybody else want to comment on the paper? No, I take it that's it. We agreed to note the 3 priority areas and progress working with Falkirk, so thanks for that. Moving on to item 6, the budget strategy update. Lindsay Sims is going to talk to this paper. Our Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you. Good morning. So this report provides Council with a regular update on the budget strategy for the year and outlines the approach to budget setting for 26-27. The report provides an update on the financial uncertainties for the Council for the coming year as set in the budget context and outlook report, which was presented to Council in February 25 ahead of the budget setting decision. The report also details the mitigations that have been put in place, including the continuation of a recruitment to critical posts only and spending restraint to ensure that spend is maintained within budget and that reserves are available to meet the financial risks if they materialise. Work is also continuing with the transformation, which was set out in the previous paper on this agenda, and regular dialogue is also being undertaken between officers and key stakeholders on the financial position of the Council, including the Scottish Government, COSLA and external auditors. Section 4 of the report sets out the approach to the 26-27 budget for the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account, Revenue and Capital budgets, and summarises the key tasks and milestones. Work on the budget is already underway, with the Budget Working Group meeting next week and the first Budget Challenge session scheduled for June. The timetable of these key tasks and milestones are further set out in Appendix A to the report. For 26-27, to further support the budget process from an all-member perspective, a cross-party working group is being proposed with representation in line with the political balance of Council. So I'm happy to take any questions on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. So any questions from members? Dennis, Councillor Coyne.
Thank you, Convener. Lindsay, Exhibit 1, page 32, the earmark reserve funds. Inexorably rising there. I'm just wondering how to interpret that. Are we getting worse at completing projects on time, or are we getting a higher level of projects to be done? It just seems strange that those earmark reserves are trending upwards almost inexorably.
It's a mix of the reserves that make up that balance, but a significant amount of them are from specific or ring-fence funding. So our employability grants, our housing grants that we receive, our Ukraine grants that we receive. So they're not spent in that one financial year. So they're given to us and we can spread them over a number of years. So that makes up quite a significant portion of that. There are also elements of that that are identified by services for projects that are delayed, so haven't been carried out in the year, that have moved into the next year due to prioritisation. So there is a mix. I don't think it's an area for concern, but it's an area that we should be keeping an eye on to make sure that we're using those reserves effectively in the purposes that are intended, and releasing any reserves back to uncommitted reserves if they're not going to be utilised. And that's what we pick up as part of the monitoring, the outturn monitoring reports through the year.
And I take it some of those earmarked reserves will have sort of a time limit on them, so that's something that needs to be monitored as well, I would imagine. Is that the case?
Some do, yes, within the terms and conditions. So again, I mentioned some of the employability grants and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, just to make sure that we're spending that within its time limit. So that's something we look at and make sure that we're complying with as well.
If we could turn now to the next page 33 and Exhibit 2 at the top, the General Services budget. Just looking at over the period, you've got an increase of 18% in net expenditure and an increase of 6.8% in net funding. We must surely be thinking something beyond just savings here. We need, I mean, for that to be budgeted, it assumes that there's no internal plan being lined up to cut the expenditure in some very meaningful way, because I mean that's obviously an intolerable situation to be 19 million pounds in deficit by that point.
Thank you. So that is a trend that most councils are seeing. So their costs are increasing with inflation, with pay awards, and while our income is not increasing from Scottish Government or from any other sources. And we've got, as a council ourselves, we've got a minimal amount that we can actually generate in terms of income. So one of the things that we're doing to actually make sure we're reducing our spend is the transformation work. So that's been on the Be the Future agenda and all the work that's been set out there. So that's the aim of us, trying to reduce our expenditure, doing things differently so that we can actually close that gap going forward.
So that, excuse me, that begs the question then that the transformation positives are not being factored in, have not been factored into that table. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct at the moment. So as the projects are developed and we identify any savings and efficiencies, then we'll build them into the savings that come forward, and that will be built into the budget gaps.
That's fine. So we should read that as if we do nothing, this is what will happen. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Dennis. Janine, Councillor Rennie.
Just on page 35, the income maximisation, a revised draft strategic approach is being developed on the investment strategy, and that was due to the unsuccessful recruitment campaign. If it's what I thought it was a rather large post, and I wondered if there's been any work to sort of make the post more focused. What's going to be the strategy moving forward with that being such a key post?
I think you can ask one of my colleagues to come in on that. I don't know if it's Kevin or Lorraine.
Yeah, Kevin.
Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Rennie. In terms of the post itself, we got all the way through the recruitment aspect to actually having somebody that we were hoping to appoint. Unfortunately, they backed out. There is an element of a number of pieces of work that we are developing in this space, including the funding vehicle that has been passed by Council in the previous meeting, which also we will take into consideration in terms of that wider aspect of work around about investment, and also considering some of the other pieces of work. So we are constantly reviewing as we do with any other opportunity that comes up in looking at that. We were scheduled to bring a paper around about the investment strategy before the funding vehicle came, and what we're trying to do is now reposition that so that we've got a much clearer position going forward, and we will certainly update members in terms of the direction of that. But the important bit for us is to make sure that we're connecting it in and make sure that those strategic connections across all of those pieces of work. We have not given up on this piece of work, and we will be pursuing it.
Catherine, Councillor Martin.
Yep. 4.9 regarding engagement with both COSLA and the Scottish Government. Fundamental to the position we're in, the financial position, the fact that our funding isn't aligned to our statistics. Now, this continued engagement, is the light at the end of the tunnel here, or because I know Ellen chews the ears off them every time she's up there. Is there hope that they'll actually look at this, reassess it, and give us the funding that we need? Sorry.
Thank you. So we've had a lot of positive engagement and quite frequent engagement in the lead up to the 25-26 budget setting, and that's continued. So I think I can definitely see the recognition of the position that we're in by the colleagues that we're speaking to. But I'll maybe ask Nikki if she wants to come in and add a bit fuller explanation to that.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. So, yeah, as Lindsay says, Councillor Martin, you may remember at a previous council meeting, I'd fed back that we'd gone extremely quite detailed in our pre-budget engagement with Scottish Government, and we've been told that information that we provided assisted ministers considerably in setting the local government allocations and probably made a very positive contribution to the improved settlement that local government saw. So we've maybe managed a bit of a positive influence for the whole sector, but obviously we've got quite a bit of work to do in terms of, advancing our own position. Those conversations continue, as Lindsay says. We were, post the budget, we were straight back into meetings with our Scottish Government colleagues. We are also working quite closely with COSLA. So Lindsay is a member of a group with a number of other local government directors of finance. Sorry, I'm choking. Lindsay's a member of a group with other directors of finance who are looking particularly at some of the barriers that exist for some particularly smaller councils. We had actually, in our discussions with Scottish Government, advanced a few potential models or suggestions of things that would be helpful as a smaller council from a financial settlement point of view, and some of those are being explicitly picked up in the scope of that group that COSLA is leading. And funnily enough, I was just thinking last night, I'm about to reach back out to the chief exec and finance lead at COSLA because they'd asked me for some information specifically on one suggestion. I shouldn't probably say it out loud because it may well be taken forward nationally, but there was a very specific suggestion that I think could be quite helpful to us, which COSLA was keen to investigate through that group. So I was going to pick that up again with Lindsay just to see where we're getting to on that. So you're absolutely right. Extremely important that we continue our dialogue with both COSLA and Scottish Government. I think the basic difficulty is it's very unlikely that the pot's going to get any bigger at all. So it's quite a difficult position to advance, because what we'd be saying is that we would need, potentially a greater share of a diminishing pot, which is what makes the discussions quite challenging. But I can assure you that we are absolutely on that constantly in terms of trying to advance the council's position, both politically and managerially.
Thank you. Brian, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question about 4.7, about the cross-party working group? I've got a slight concern, because there's only 8 elected members that's going to be, what does it say, represented, reflective of the makeup of the council. So usually that means that Councillor Holden herself isn't invited. Or we have to fight for the one seat we get between us. So I'm just wondering, can you tell me how the makeup of that's going to be, and is it going to mean that all groups and individuals are going to be represented? They're not all individuals, but it does mean that all the political opinions in the council are going to be involved in this group, or does that mean that anyone's going to be excluded because of the makeup? Thank you.
Nikki, could you provide some thought on that?
Certainly, Provost. The discussion that we've had, Councillor Quinn, was that actually the selection of 8 members was to allow for exactly the position that you describe. So the intention is to get a balance that's reflective of the political makeup of council. It wasn't, I know, I think Lindsay said political balance, but we're not aiming for political balance. We want to allow the opportunity for those councillors who are not potentially in a group or a party position to be able to advance themselves as representatives on that group too.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks. No, that sounds good.
Are there any further questions from members? You can see hands up. So Helen, Councillor Forster, want to move the paper?
Yeah, I prepared something and moving the paper today, but I think I'll just abandon that in the light of all the questions that have been asked. I thank Lindsay for the update there. I mean, what's coming through in this paper is nothing that we're not expecting to see. It was highlighted in the budget context paper, and it was highlighted when we set our budget earlier this year. It's a very, very challenging position. And, I just want to kind of highlight a few of the challenges. As part of the budget, we agreed a pressures fund, and I think it's pretty clear to see that it's most certainly that it's going to be fully utilised, if not exceeded, and that's for a number of reasons. The union's pay claim, we've budgeted 3%, and the union's pay claim is coming in above that, which is going to put significant pressures on the council. With that comes the challenge of the increased national insurance contributions, because it's been budgeted at, it will cost us £800,000, but then that will be increased through any kind of increase in the pay claim as well. And there is a real chance that our third sector, our third party partners will be passing on the cost of the national insurance to the council as well. So the funding that was identified for the pressures is probably going to be eaten up just by that before we even look at anything else. So I think it was a prudent thing to do. I think the financial forecast always also highlights the importance of the transformation work that's been going on, as has been brought out through the questions there. That's going to be absolutely key to delivering financial sustainability in the council. So the funding that has been allocated to deliver that transformation work in the budget is going to be absolutely key. Without that, we wouldn't be able to kind of carry out any of the transformation work. So I'm actually pleased that that was passed. In relation to engagement with the governments and with COSLA, it's a difficult situation because we go to COSLA, one of 32 local authorities, and I think as the chief executives kind of highlighted, it's not expected that there's going to be a bigger budget kind of in the coming years. The forecasts are that the UK government is going to give a smaller settlement to the Scottish government, which ultimately means a smaller settlement for us. So when we're talking with colleagues at COSLA,
and you're trying to advance a position that we should get more funding, it has to come from that pot. And with all the best will in the world, while they might agree that we are due more funding, they're not going to volunteer to give up any of their own funding to help deliver that. So we have to, I suppose, be a bit smarter about it and make the case. And I think that's certainly something that myself and the Chief Executive and Lindsay, through Directors of Finance, have been doing. So part of the engagement this week, we hosted a visit from the Equalities Minister to talk about the work across our Violence Against Women and Girls partnership. And that was highlighting that the Scottish Government give us £14,000 a year to deliver that work, when actually we probably invest in excess of £200,000 to, deliver that work. So we're trying to say, you're liking the work that we're doing, you need to be giving us more money. So we're taking every single opportunity through every single cabinet portfolio to have these conversations and highlight the case for Clackmannanshire. And I think there's a lot of sympathy out there. They just don't know what the answer is. So again, with part of the transformation work, we're trying to come up with what the answer could be and kind of give government solutions that will help us and other local authorities within that. So a lot of work going on. The kind of report is what it is, and it said what we knew was coming down the line. There's nothing new there. And we just need to keep on pushing forward the lobbying work with the governments, with COSLA, pushing forward the transformation work. And I think part of the work that we do have, and that's going to be challenging, is having honest discussions with our communities about the services that can be delivered, how they can be delivered, and what they're going to cost. Because the way things are looking is our budget's going to fall below our ability to provide statutory services. And that comes with very, very difficult decisions. So I'm happy to propose the paper.
Thank you, Ellen. Graham, Councillor Lindsay. Well, should have been left much to add to that, but there's a few things. I think what the report does, it absolutely does clearly outline the financial challenges that we face, and I think, it's absolutely clear that context that's been outlined. I think what it does as well is outline that the budget we agreed earlier on in the year, it was really the only way forward, and that any deviation from that would have really put us in greater financial difficulty over the subsequent years as we've kind of drawn out. And this has been, I suppose, reinforced by the additional ask from the IJB for the Health and Social Care Partnership as well. We've got reserves now at 2%. We can no longer look at these as a tool or a way of balancing the budget. We need to look at other things, as I say, that's been drawn out in question, and in particular a transformation programme, which we need to, I was going to say hopefully, but we need to see fruit coming from that as well. I'm sure we will, but these are things that we need to drive forward. I'm not going to go further into the kind of macro political situation. We know we're not getting enough money coming forward. We know we're harming ourselves in a sense in terms of growth by increasing employers' contributions. We can see the increase here, and the increase to our partners as well that we're working with. There's an impact there which will have an impact on our ability to deliver services appropriately within the council as to the standard that we're used to. So we absolutely need to make the case. I think politically across the board we need to make the case and be bashing the door down in terms of looking for increased settlement. But we know the difficulties with that, and those have been reinforced today. Just in terms of that approach to the budget setting, hopefully we've been pretty clear as an administration that we absolutely want to work across the board. The council leaders reiterated that over the last couple of years, setting up all member forums to discuss these things. So hopefully that what we're keen to do is probably, because we like to try and influence some of this as well, so what we're keen to do is to ensure that maybe it's not just an all-member briefing, but it is focused on a certain number of individuals, but enabling everybody to be part of that. So if that means there's less of us around that table and it's just not a couple of people nominated from the group, then we're comfortable with that. But the main thing is that we want everybody represented, everybody buying into it, hopefully. It's not going to be weekly, it will be just, a couple of opportunities or 2 or 3 opportunities across the year to make sure that we're all engaged in the process, we're all clear on what's in front of us in terms of the information and data, and that we're able to come to maybe not collective decision at the end of the day, but certainly, you know, an informed decision on that. So just to reinforce that in terms of the discussion that's going on behind that. But I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Graham, for that fulsome response. Are there any other comments in the paper? No. So we're agreeing the programme in Appendix A and noting points 2.12 through to 2.18. Is that agreed? Thank you. Agreed. Moving on to item 7, page 43. Commission changes to the model of long-term care for older adults and the impact of Clackmannanshire Council. This is an update, and Kevin's going to speak to this paper.
Morning, Provost. If it's okay, I'll start and then Kevin will come in. John MacDonald, Interim Chief Officer. The paper before you, which has got the link to the Integration Joint Board paper, brings to Council the decision that was made by the Integration Joint Board in March with regards to services that are being provided within Menstrie House. And the attached paper gives all the detail around that. The paper as well gives some detail around the engagement, not only with our staff, but with the residents and with their families at Menstrie House. This was a really, really difficult decision and really recognised a bit the impact on the residents and staff there. So really happy to take questions, comments around that, and Kevin will add around the property.
Chair. Joanna, thank you for that part of it. In terms of the paper, just to add into that, is we recognise that in terms of the direction of travel, the property itself will come back into the council's portfolio. In that sense, we recognise this as a strategic plot for us in terms of the potential assets and how that asset could be utilised in different ways. And we will certainly look at how that could be potentially utilised in terms of housing, etc., for even our own or some of our RSL partners in that sense, but will ultimately be considered as part of that wider asset management strategy, ensuring that we are looking at all the potentials that is available to us within the council in terms of service delivery and making use of that asset for our local people. Obviously, that will be contained within the wider asset management strategy that works as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin, and sorry for not naming you, John. Ellen, Councillor Forson, question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Part of the decision taken around about Menstrie House was about the evidence that's shown that providing care at home for people is much better for people. They live longer, better lives. What I'm a wee bit concerned about is that it has been kind of mooted that we don't have sufficient plans in place around about what that care at home model would look like at the moment, and I'm just wondering whether you could give me some update on that, Joanna.
Yeah, thank you. There's reference to the strategic commissioning plan that was agreed nearly 3 years ago, which is due for renewal, and that really details, I suppose, our long-term direction. I think there has been significant changes in relation to people supported at home within our Clackmannanshire communities. In the time of the IJB, we've nearly doubled the amount of care at home hours that are provided to support people within their own homes. So there's a clear strategic commissioning plan which is based on Scottish Government principles around integration and the health and wellbeing outcomes that are part of the Public Bodies Joint Working Act. Really, it gives the high level direction of travel. We've got more detailed planning around I suppose expanding not just the having residential care services or having care at home services, but having much more flexible care. And we presented here at a separate meeting around self-directed support and the direction of travel, which is broader than just how people are receiving their services, but putting them more in control and at the centre of their services. So I think there has been a concern about Menstrie House, and as I said in my introductions, can't underestimate the decision that was made and the recognition of the impact on people and on our communities, many of whom have loved and welcomed the service for over 40 years.
Thanks for that. A couple other questions. The ability to stay at home will depend on many things, and a lot of that will be including adaptations to houses, which might require interventions from planning, building control, etc. Have there been any discussions, I suppose, with the council to ensure that there's the kind of capacity and the ability to kind of pick up the extra work that's going to come from that?
Yeah, so Kevin and I are joint presenting this paper because it's absolutely critical that we're working across the council. In my role as Chief Officer, I am one of Nicky's direct reports as the Director of the Council here. It's work that's really been highlighted the importance of taking a whole system approach with our new approach to referrals to social work that we introduced on the 31st of March, which has actually seen huge progress in relation to small aids and adaptations and the provision of them in a much more timely manner. And that's a report we're going to be taking to the IGB at the end of this month, and also with the intention that we bring that to both the councils afterwards. So we're actually getting into a bit more detail and sharing that information, because we're aware, I'm certainly aware through the whole Menstrie House process in the 5 months I've been here, that there are many more opportunities to actually share and get into the detail of our adult social care and how that's provided here.
Thanks. Sorry, I forgot a few more questions. Obviously, you know, kind of living at home is the intended and the best thing for people, but sometimes it's just not possible. Are we confident that we still have the capacity within the system if living at home is not possible for a person, that we'd still be able to find a solution?
I think one of the strengths of how we now deliver care at home and support people living at home is that it's more often the case nowadays that when they're no longer able to live at home, that they've got nursing care needs, and they need to have nurses and social care staff to support them. But actually, again, and this is where I'd really welcome bringing back to the council, we are supporting so many people with complex needs with dementia in our communities currently, that again, probably because of the last 10 years or so with integration and the lack of sight, I think it would be really helpful to raise awareness around that. In relation to our current residents and their families within Menstrie House, we're down to 7 residents at the end of this week. For each of the residents, it's been difficult for the staff to see them move on, and for their families. Most of the residents and families have now identified alternative placements and are on waiting lists for placements to become available there. So again, that is work that we really need to be cited on, the increasing demand and need to support people with more complex nursing needs in their communities.
Thanks. Now, all elected members would have received an email, you're probably not cited on it, from our union colleagues this week, and they raised specific concerns about how the process had been handled for staff at Menstrie House. And I think it's fair to say that there is a real breakdown of kind of trust between the employer and staff and the unions in relation to this. Can you give us some assurances that, you know, this process will be, I suppose, handled better, and that we can address the concerns that are coming forward?
Yes, and if I can just add, and I should have mentioned at the beginning, we've actually got Paul Cameron, our Head of Service, who's here as well, I suppose, demonstrating our commitment moving forward. When a decision like this is made, it's always really difficult for our staff and always really difficult for our communities. We have absolutely got learning from this process that I've already discussed, and the Chief Exec has been really clear around that, around our communication, about how we're engaging, how we're much more working upstream with our unions. I was actually part of the Clackmannanshire trade union meeting just yesterday. Paul was there also, and we were really open at that. We need to look at the learning here. Transformation of services is not a case of just moving from A to B to the new service. There's a process in between, and we need to ensure we're supporting our staff as much as possible. Also, just add that we met with staff throughout the process and met with staff yesterday morning at Menstrie House, really just to ensure that they're cited. I'm hoping that actually we've got staff online or watching this, because we're certainly promoting that they really are seeing in a very transparent way the process.
Okay, I think what's coming across to me pretty loud and clear from constituents and people in the community is they feel really disconnected from the decisions that are being made by the IGB. I think when a decision is made by council, it's much more transparent. There's papers that are out there. They can contact elected members, and we have kind of discussions. How can we make sure that we're much more engaged with our local communities, so that they know, one, who's taking the decisions, because I've certainly had a lot of contacts about decisions being taken that I've not been part of, and two, how they can feed back into the decision-making process so that they feel like their voices are being heard.
I think this is a really fair comment, and it's not unusual to us here. I think 10 years on from integration and significant personnel changes, that feeling of influence is quite different nowadays. So I think from what you've said, we've got more opportunities to promote the work of the Integration Joint Board, which has representation from both councils and from the NHS. We've got service user engagement on the board. We've got staff user reps. We have open engagement with, for example, our Clackmannanshire Older Adults Forum. So certainly myself and on behalf of the team here, more than happy to engage. I think that's probably part of the discussion that I've been having with the Chief Executive about how we do that in a proactive way and how we engage all of you as elected members. The governance, the decision making is through the IGB, but this is impacting on all of our communities and our people here in Clackmannanshire. And I think it's really important that you feel you're cited on what's happening, and actually that you have got an influence around that as well. So I think we've work to do in relation to improving that in the future.
Thanks. And one last question, and this one's for Kevin. There was contact from the press locally recently about the future of the building, and there was some suggestion that it might be turned into a centre for asylum seekers. I think that at the same time as that, this situation had arisen in some other council areas where similar situations had been suggested anonymously, that they were going to be turned into asylum seekers, and I think we all know the agenda that's kind of happening there. Can I ask whether the council has had any discussion with the Home Office or any other organisation in relation to the future of that site for an asylum centre?
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Leader. The answer to that is there's been none.
Thank you, Ellen. Scott, Councillor Harrison.
Thanks, Robert. That was asked and answered. Thanks.
Okay. Ladies first, so Janine, Councillor Rennie.
Can I just ask, it came to my mind actually when Ellen was asking her questions there in terms of, obviously we're talking a lot about the care needs and, everything that's going to be put in place for residents when they're back in the community. Now, one of the things that research shows, particularly with people with dementia, is that specific programmes in place in care establishments are really, really useful to stop that deterioration, to keep people's well-being okay. So while we're looking at care needs, because that's really obviously essential, what's been done about isolation and the fact that people are not getting that stimulation, and I know there's self-directed support, but generally that's more on the care side. And I know there is elements where you can actually use your self-directed support to bring in other services, but actually if your priority is health, then those things kind of maybe fall off. But actually there's been real research to show that people's deterioration is really significant in dementia, particularly if they don't have the right stimulation and support. So what's going to be done about that?
Yeah. Sorry, I completely agree with you around the loneliness and isolation, not just for the people with dementia, but also their carers. Wendy Forrest, who's our head of commissioning, is also here today, and that's work that she's been progressing in relation to not just the short breaks, but actually looking at how the communities come together and liaise really closely with the community groups. Again, I think it'd be really helpful for members here to have more understanding of what's actually happening. Also, there's lots of research around this for people with dementia. Living in their own home with what they're familiar with is really, really important. And again, we're supporting more people here within Clackmannanshire who've got more complex needs. But the carers work in particular is an area that I think that loneliness and isolation can be quite it can really quite stark for individuals. So I think that's certainly a discussion I'd be really keen to have around, I suppose, not just for people with dementia, but for all of our people who have got care needs in the communities.
Just to come back on that, my concern really is a lot of people have been in an establishment, they maybe don't have family members locally, and in a lot of cases they may not have, so they may not have those informal carers in place. And yeah, absolutely, it's not just people with dementia, but generally that would be fine if there were those support mechanisms in place. But my concern is when there isn't that support from family, home can also be a very isolating place for people who have nobody, basically. Sorry, that wasn't really, is that not right?
It's okay.
Just to agree, I don't think we talk about loneliness and social isolation enough. Thank you.
Okay, at a flurry of hands, I think Kathleen, and then Craig, and then Kenny on this side, and I'll come over to this side. So Kathleen.
My concern is allied to what Ellen and Janine said. It's about capacity. Who's going to put all these arrangements in place? Because we're struggling in adult social care, we're struggling for carers. How is this going to work if we're continually putting pressure? Sorry, I'm being Mrs. Negative today, but if we're continually putting pressure on it, and what we're doing now is we're just adding to that. Are you confident that this can be covered? Sorry.
So I think again is we have grown our care in the community. We have grown the services we're providing. There are gaps in areas that we absolutely need to be looking at, and as we've just mentioned there, in relation to people being supported in their own homes, as I've said, we've still got 7 valued residents in Menstrie House. So the number of people going into residential care has reduced as more people go into care. They have got nursing needs as opposed to residential. It's an area that Kevin and I have had some brief discussions so far around the whole housing strategy and what are our needs for our communities in relation to building and support. We have got excellent examples, for example, of sheltered housing next to Ludgate, where we've got great community support and lots of things going on there. So I think there's learning for us in parts of Clackmannanshire that we can build across the rest of the local authority. But it is an area that I've got confidence in what we're delivering with, but we're always going to have challenges to meet everyone's needs, and that's something that we've been living with for years.
Thank you. Craig, Councillor Hall.
Thanks, Joanna. Can I just ask, the report obviously outlines the fact that there's been a change in terms of the model of long-term care and the approach to that in Clackmannanshire. Has there been a corresponding change in approach in Stirling?
So Stirling underwent a change, similar change for the closer care home approximately 5-6 years ago, and it was equally as difficult as these situations and scenarios are. So this is about, as we've heard today, it's about supporting people in their own homes where we can and where they want to be in their own homes, but having a more consistent service and offer across the whole of Clackmannanshire and Stirling.
Can I just ask for the benefit of members and obviously members of the public as well? In terms of the residential care home for older adults, how many of those are there in Clackmannanshire?
I don't have that information handy, so I can get that information back to you, Councillor Holden, if that's okay.
Okay. Can I ask how many of those facilities are in Stirling?
I'll need to get all of that information, and actually it might be helpful to also, if I get all of that information for members, to highlight what's residential and what's nursing care as well. So apologies, I don't have that handy.
There are some members, alluded to the fact about the IGB take decisions, and there are no members in that board. Can I ask how many members there are in the IGB from Clackmannanshire Council?
There are 3.
Can I ask how many members there are on the IGB from Stirling Council?
There are 3. And there are 6 from the NHS.
That was my next question.
I anticipate to Councillor Holden.
Can I ask what happens if there is a decision on the IGB where, I'm going to put up a scenario for you here, where let's just say 6 NHS members vote for option A and 3 local authority members from Stirling vote for option B and 3 local authority members from Clackmannanshire vote for option B. What happens?
So I think one of the strengths of the division of voting shares on the IGB is that we've got membership from the NHS and from both councils. The voting shares are really relevant, but actually for me, the huge voice that's on the IGB is actually people representing service users. And there are meetings with them before the meetings to ensure they're really engaged, to ensure they have a voice, and actually going back to the Main Street decision, not just the decision that was made in March, but prior to that in January, they really did articulate their views, which are a strong influence for our voting members. So I've only been here 5 months, haven't been in a position where we've had that situation, that scenario, but there's potential for there being a majority voting that impacts in one area as opposed to another area.
But equally, there's a potential for a tie in terms of how the IGB would approach a particular issue. And what I'm asking is specifically in terms of the governance model, what happens in such a situation such as that, where there is a tie in terms of the members voting. We know what happens if, say, for instance, the NHS representatives and one of the councils all vote for one particular option. What I'm asking is what happens if there is a split. The model affords the opportunity for there to be a split simply because of the numbers. There's 6 and there's 3 and there's 3. I'm assuming the service users, how many places do service users have on the IGB?
I think so firstly, the model, the division is based on the Public Bodies Joint Working Act, which was designed for one local authority and one NHS, and it states there has to be an equal number from the local authority, and hence the 6 and the 6. We're getting into technicalities that actually I'm looking to Lee from a legal perspective, because I think we're getting into some of the technicalities about the IGB workings that it might be helpful to bring in Lee to answer.
Thanks, Joanna. I'm looking up at standing orders. So Clackmannanshire Council used to rotate the clerking of the IGB over the years. But for the last year, we haven't been involved in anything in relation to the reports of the clerking. I know the standing orders have been changed in relation to this, and I'm kind of looking it up on the hoof. So if you want me to give an answer, I to have some time to have a review of that and then come back to you. Or if you're happy, I'm happy to come back to all elected members directly in relation to this question later. Or if you want the answer now, it will just take me time.
I'm aware it's perhaps a complex issue, so perhaps if you can just make sure we get the right answer. And if that answer for you to all elected members, I think that's fine.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I can give a little briefing email to all elected members in relation to how the voting rights and how that works in terms of standing orders and the integration scheme.
My final question, Provost, is in relation to, I've asked similar questions for Clackmannanshire and Stirling. My final question is in relation to Stirling, and I know we've alluded to the point about that there was a similar type facility, let's call it that, was closed 6 or 7 years ago in the Stirling area. I would ask how many have closed in total for the Stirling area.
So I'd probably have to go back and check over the years how many have been closed, but I can answer a question, your earlier question about how many nursing homes we have. So we've got 30 nursing homes across the partnership, and we've no other residential apart from Main Street House. So all of our homes are nursing. They do provide residential as well, but they can provide nursing to all of the residents there. Would you like to come in?
More information.
Thank you. Sorry, just in response to your question, there are 4 homes that have closed over the period just preceding the integration authority up till now in the Stirling area. Thanks.
And there are no more to close?
There are no more internal directly provided care home provisions run by Stirling Council other than the Belfield Centre is jointly run by the NHS Forth Valley and Stirling Council.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Kenny's not went in. Was there any other questions from this side of the... No.
So if there are no further questions, I'll Ellen.
Thanks, Provost. So, in March of this year, the Immigration Joint Board made a significant decision to change the model of long-term care provision in Clackmannanshire, because this decision was deemed the most viable option to ensure that our residents continue to receive the appropriate level of nursing care where needed. The strategic direction for long-term care within the partnership was upheld, and that we make the most responsible use of public funds, given the increasing costs of sustaining the current service. As a result of this change, the board will no longer place individuals in Menstrie House, meaning that it will become surplus to requirements for its current use by December 2025. I wanted to take the opportunity to address some speculation that had been circulating. As Kevin has confirmed, at present there are no identified plans for the future use of the Menstrie House site. However, it remains a valuable strategic asset, and I think we would all agree that there's clear potential use for future use, particularly in areas such as supportive care or adaptive housing, potentially in partnership with others. I'm particularly interested in exploring whether this site could align with the emerging City Deal proposals, particularly around the Sustainable Ageing project, as I think this could be an opportunity to repurpose the site in a way that continues to support our community's evolving needs. I think as it's been drawn out quite clearly here, this has been a difficult decision for us to articulate to our communities, mostly because the majority of us had no kind of part in the decision-making process. And I think we do need to be tightening up on how we ensure that there's engagement with elected members before decisions are taken, during the process that they're taken, and afterwards, but also with our communities and the service users. Because although there is engagement with service users, it was pretty clear to me that people contacting me had no idea that this sort of engagement was going on. So we do need to take the opportunity to tighten up on that. So I'm looking forward to seeing the future paper in relation to the future of the Menstrie House site. Because, as I've said, I do think there are potential opportunities there. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Forson. Wendy, Councillor Hamilton, second.
I'll formally second.
Thank you. Are there any other comments in the paper? Great, Councillor Holden.
Yeah, just a couple of brief comments. The point was made earlier, and the line of questioning that I was taking was around this area of accountability. There's been many questions raised locally around this decision. The council leaders already alluded to the fact that the council as a body has no decision-making authority in terms of this. However, we do have members of this council who are present on the IGB. And Ellen had made the point. It's about having a bit more clarity about the IGB decision-making. And if I can say this with all the best intentions, at the very few times when I've ever been trusted to represent this organisation on an external body, I always took it upon myself to come back and report on it. Now, and I'm not offering any lectures to anybody here, I'm simply making the point that it's incumbent upon us when we're a member of a board such as this, an external body, if we think there is something that's important, and this is certainly within that category, then I think it's our duty bound to come back here and inform the council. By the way, I'm on the IGB. This is the issues we're discussing. This has a major implication for our local communities, and I'm making you aware of it because I'm one of the representatives on there. And equally, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to vote. I don't know how we vote. Nobody does, I would suspect. I've never seen it. And we will be out there. I don't make a habit of reading through the IGB minutes, but the fact is I perhaps should pay more attention to it. But there is an opportunity for elected members who are on the IGB to come back here and tell us in advance the decisions that they think are important. These are the things that are coming up. They might even want to take some soundings from local councillors in terms of how they think they would want to represent our wishes for that. So there's an opportunity there for that. There's another point that's been touched upon by the council leader was about speculation. And I know, and she's not guilty of doing this, and I don't think any of us are. We try not to respond back to these, because if we're going to do it, we'll be responding back every day of the week. Because everybody in his dug has got a theory on what's going to happen to someone whenever it happens in Clackmannanshire. And 99% of the time, it's nonsense. And I'm glad that there's but I've got some sympathy for it. But if we do this all the time, we're going to keep on spending nothing more than enough time coming back here, and rather than being informative about the decisions that have been taken by the IGB, but it's just kind of responding to speculation. How can I put it? There's some members of our community who are not particularly well intentioned towards either the council, the IGB, or anybody else that I can see. But I welcome the report. Obviously, the recommendation is that we note this. And I was looking about to see if the press were here today. I think it's really important that we've got the press and that the press can report on these matters, because we have very limited ways in which we can communicate these issues to the public. Social media is no one that's particularly helpful. We've got a comms department, and I think we should be looking at that. I think there should be some messages sent about who ultimately took this decision. But the line of question, I just want to conclude on this line of question that I took, is really about this part about accountability. About how accountable the members are that are on the IGB to the members of the council here, and how accountable we are to members of the Clackmannanshire public. And equally that we are aware of these things and how these decisions are played out. There's a great deal of frustration and confusion about this. I mean, I'm asking the questions blind, a couple of questions blind today about the number of residential care homes in Stirling, not because I've got an agenda there, but there is clearly a feeling locally that when you have an imbalance in a voting structure, and I've seen it happen with the police board. We all know we've had the police board, had the fire board in years past, where local authorities can combine with other local authorities or with other organisations to outvote other ones to the detriment of those. And that's a concern that exists. Now, whether that's real or not remains to be seen, because I think we need to have a bit more clarity and a bit more explanation about the structures, about the governance models, about how decisions are reached. And I would respectfully suggest that there is an opportunity for elected members within this council to be a bit more proactive about how they report back what they're doing. I'm not saying they're not doing their job, and I'm sure they are, I absolutely know they are. I'm making the point, there's an opportunity to come back here and let us know about it. And it kind of heads off any of the speculation that exists out there in the community about what's happening in facilities such as this, and what our role as an organisation is in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Holden. Although it's not the focus of today's paper, you have raised an important issue about not just the Joint Integration Board reporting back in terms of the various outside bodies that we sit on, and that's been a perennial issue for us. But I think it is one that we want to put our thinking caps on in terms of how we report back. Any other, Councillor Coyne?
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I just want to pick up sort of where Craig's point, because I think he raised an important issue, and it's to look at when people are appointed to the IGB, on what basis are they appointed? Are they appointed because they're an acknowledged expert on matters of public health, or is it because they happen to occupy a particular position within the council? If it's the latter, then I think they're there representing the council rather than there to present their own intellect and experience. And if that is the case, if they're representing the council, they have an obligation. It's not just a good idea, it's an obligation, I think, to take instruction from council and to feed back to council. I think that's an important part of the mechanism. And I know that the timings won't always be convenient, that it could be done at these information sessions could be done in full council. Then there has to be some informal method where, before we launch into a discussion as a representative on the IGB, we kind of know what the feelings of this council are, because it's this council that's picking up the bill, not the individual voter that's picking up the bill for it. So the decisions have to be democratic.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. I'm chairing this meeting in a wee bit, but I'd like Lee to come in actually, because when you're an elected member and you're sitting on an external board, there are particular governance things that are placed upon you. I was wondering if you want to just address that particular point that Councillor Coyne raised, Lee.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would need to go back and double check the integration scheme in relation to the positions, but ultimately the council voted for the elected members who are currently sitting on the board. Further, my understanding is that they, while are Clack's elected members, their position on the board is that of members of the IGB board, not as council elected members.
Yes, thanks very much, and I totally agree with you. We probably should be able to report back to council, but this was actually, before this meeting today, we'll be aware that actually checked out with Lee whether I should be expressing an interest in terms of this paper and one of the final papers, because it's been very clear in my training on the IGB. I've been on the IGB for 8 years now, but like, it's been very clear in my training for the IGB that when you're on the IGB, you're representing the IGB. So it is probably an area for further exploration, which means we're bound by all the things like confidentiality in the IGB. Obviously, some of the meetings are public meetings, and then we would be absolutely able to share any information from public meetings that are out in the public domain anyway. But as in governance of any organisation, we would then be bound by the confidentiality of that organisation, but also we would have to have 2 hats as such. So, you know, so it's a very challenging area, and Lee and I were back and forth, I think, with 10 emails, I think, to discuss whether I did have a conflict of interest or not. And we decided I didn't, but it is a very important area that you raise, and one I think for further exploration from my own point of view as well, from the kind of safety about what our role is in different meetings that we attend.
Thank you. Fiona, Councillor Law.
Law, Fiona. I was going to say the exact same thing as Jean. I checked out as well to see whether I had any be classed as a conflict of interest, because I'm also on the IGB. So, and I would say, as I think I've just sat in 2 meetings, I can't express how difficult it is, especially under the current situation, to be a member of the IGB, but also a councillor for Clackmannanshire Council, and I'm very conscious of that. In the meetings, I'd be happy to share information as long as I can find out that I am able to. I mean, I think we just got papers yesterday, I think they're over 200 pages long, for the next IGB. I'm happy to share that if I can. I actually just went onto the website just to find out, because it does say you can click on the meeting and date and view the papers, but the one for the 21st of May, when I click on that, it's not actually bringing the papers up, so I don't know if they were public. Obviously we could share them because they're on the website, but you know, as far as because they're not there, I couldn't share them just now, but it would be good to know going forward. But as Janine says, you know, you are made very clear that you are a member of the IGB, you're not there as the councillor, same as now sitting on the NHS board. I'm an NHS board member, not a councillor when I'm there, so it is that kind of really difficult, because you have to do what is for that board, not for the interest of the council. But obviously, you know, you can't completely separate those. We're members, residents of Clackmannanshire, so you are thinking exactly, you know, what is the benefit for people for Clackmannanshire. And I know, so just going forward, I think there is a lot more difficult decisions going with what the IGB budget is. But I'm happy to share information as long as I can legally do that, and I'm not going to get up on a code of conduct issue. So
Fiona, I was going to ask Lee to come in at this, because we are straying into the bigger topics rather than the paper. But Lee, I think you've got a few comments.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide any guidance support in relation to the kind of roles that you are with the IGB and your roles that you are with the council, and how that interlinks, and in terms of facilitating some of the discussions that are going on here. And so I'm happy to have a look at that and again feedback to elected members in relation to that, if that's okay.
Thank you, Lee.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to say, Fiona, in terms of the paper?
Okay.
Graham?
It's Councillor Lindsay.
Councillor Lindsay.
Sorry. Okay, Graham, that's fine. Yeah, just to take it back, I suppose, the sensitivity around the situation, and not to dwell on that, but I think, you know, as I'm representative of the Menstrie community, so I think it's incumbent to sort of represent some of the views that have come from there as well. And that's not to delve back into decisions being made, but you know, has been a difficult situation for all connected to Menstrie House. It's been a bit of a cloud over this one for quite some time as well. So at least from one perspective, it's good that that cloud is at least lifted in terms of clarity. But it does present, you know, a lot of sensitivity, challenge for those involved, those that have been connected to it over the years, and not least the staff that have been involved and really done an amazing job within that particular facility and service. I think there's a few things that have come out of this today, especially, and I think It's probably the best way of putting it. Is I was at a community council meeting on Wednesday there, on Tuesday, sorry, and although I was able to, you know, outline and articulate, look, this is the, you know, just to reinforce, you're all aware of it, but this is the rationale that was presented for the closure, and able to get that across. I did find it difficult in terms of just being able to reassure those around the table and those within the community that, you know, this is absolutely the right way forward. And obviously I'm trying to advocate for that and trying to give some confidence, but I don't think I did a very good job of it. You know, I don't think I reassured everybody that this is absolutely the right way and going to work. And I'm not saying it's not the right way. I think it has to be the right way forward. We have to work with this model of care and support people in their own home. But, you know, the discussion we had is, you know, we've got a lot of people, a lot of need out there. It's similar to some of the comments that have come out here as well. We know we've got an ageing population. That's no different in Clackmannanshire as well. We've got the loss of this service, and we've got our challenges, our contexts, as we've already outlined in our other papers here as well. So the point here is more to say, look, and you know, I get comfort from Joanna's point about just that communication level and lifting that level of communication with communities, because, you know, I'll try my best as an elected member. It's right for me to do that, to try and reassure communities of policy decisions that have been made, whether that's that policy decisions that I've got direct influence on, or those that are coming from outside bodies. But when they affect our communities in the way that they do, and they are services that are integral to, you know, our way of life, then it's just providing that comfort and that confidence is essential in communication and connection with our communities. So I'd welcome further discussion just on how we get that right in terms of, you know, outlining the successes of the move to that model of care, and how we continue to reinforce, look, this is absolutely the right way. Here are examples of how we're doing that really well, and there was a couple that were outlined already. So I'm sure you get where I'm going with that, but I think that just needs to be something that's far more regular and frequent in terms of any reporting that we do get on this particular model of care going forward. Just that, so I'm armed, we're all armed, and the community, you know, have been outlined, you know, how things can get out of hand pretty quickly. It all just becomes about a financial decision. It all just becomes about, because, you know, we've got to create space for, you know, asylum seekers. It gets out of hand, so we need, and it's difficult to combat some of that. We're never going to fully combat some of that stuff, but we allow, I think, vacuums at times to be created, and it's just ensuring that communication is absolutely on point. And I do take comfort. I think the communication level has, you know, since Joanna's been here as well, that it feels like it's far more frequent. It feels like we're getting updated as elected members a lot more as well. So hopefully I've made the point there. But certainly, you know, we feel the sensitivity that still exists within the community, and it's really now just about building confidence within mainstream, but across Clackmannanshire that we are on the right track in terms of this model of care. Just very, I don't want to dwell too much on kind of that role. Look, accountability, absolutely agree, there needs to be accountability. I think in terms of the reporting back, that ultimately needs to be the IGB, linked to what I've just said in terms of that lifting that communication level. It is a tricky one, and it's something we've discussed as a group in terms of the role that our representatives have in the IGB, and it's always been our belief, which it is, it's fact, that they are representing the IGB and not the council. That's really difficult for the public to chew over. And again, that when we're referencing this in public and getting asked who's representing us, that's a really difficult one, because you can only be in that position if you're an elected member in Clackmannanshire. But then when you go into that position, you're an IGB rep and you're solely focused on that, and you've got to just throw everything else out the back when you're making decisions about an area that you represent. So it's a really, really tricky one, but definitely warrants further discussion. But yeah, I think it's, I'll leave it for that just now, but it was just to reinforce a couple of points there, particularly about ongoing communication and confidence in our communities. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lindsay. Any other members want to come in? No, I think we've had.
Can I sum up, please, Provost?
Of course, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just want to take the opportunity to sum up, not to go over what's been said, but just to kind of clarify a few points. This council can appoint 3 members to the IGB as per the integration scheme, and we take the decision. It's usually been kind of one from each of the 3 main groups. So we do appoint our members, and it's up to the groups to decide who's the best placed within that to take that forward, just as we do for many other appointments. I myself have sat on the IGB and I've been a health board rep for this council, and it was very, very difficult for me because the chair of the health board at the time, he took great pleasure in putting me in my place and telling me that I wasn't there to represent Clackmannanshire Council, and that my role, in fact I got a very lengthy email about what my role was supposed to be within that role, and the same with the IGB. So I've got a lot of sympathy for our members who are on there, because they have to almost take one hat off and put another on, and focus really on what their role is there. It's one of these things that has arisen because of the nature of IGBs and the Health and Social Care Partnership. I think what was supposed to bring services together is just adding another layer of bureaucracy and taking accountability away from councils and local communities. That wasn't the intention, but that's where I think we've ended up. And I think we've got a job to do to try and kind of move that forward. We're not alone in this. This happens in other council areas as well. Some manage it a wee bit better than others, and I think we should be looking to see where other partnerships kind of produce better results. I know certainly in my time as council leader, I've almost felt like a bit of an annoyance to several chief officers of the IGB when I'm asking questions and asking to meet on a regular basis. It's almost felt like they didn't feel that that was their job. Well, I think it is the job of the chief officers to engage with the council leader and also other councillors. And I've certainly had discussions with Joanna, and she's certainly very willing to do this. And I know that it's her intention to put out a regular briefing to all elected members about work that's going on within the Health and Social Care Partnership and decisions that are being made. So hopefully that will help to address some of the concerns. And we might go into this a little bit later, but one of the reasons that Clackmannanshire Council has not signed the integration scheme is that we are not comfortable with how the integration scheme allows for accountability over a number of different areas. And that's something that we can maybe pick up later, and we'll certainly be looking forward to taking forward with partners in health and Stirling Council. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks, obviously, for Joan for her attendance. I think we've had a very broad-ranging debate that's raised quite a number of issues for us. However, I'd like to bring members' focus back on the paper, and we're essentially being asked to note that this was a decision of the Joint Integration Board in terms of their implementation of the long-term care strategy for Clackmannanshire. And secondly, that Menstrie House will come back into the property portfolio of Clackmannanshire Council, and we'll have an options paper coming back to us in terms of the future of that building. Is that duly noted? Thank you. Moving on to item 8, page 47, the quality impact assessment of home to school transport policy. And Lorraine Sander, Director of People, is going to speak to this paper.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. This paper is in relation to the commitment that we gave in January 2025 to bring back an equality impact assessment on school transport policies. The update in the paper is that we've been unable to bring that back to today's council meeting, and we will bring that back with your agreement if the paper is passed on at the next council meeting. The reason why we've been unable to do that is the equalities impact assessment has actually required us to take some external legal advice, and due to that and issues with capacity within this task, we've been unable to complete it by the deadline that we set ourselves. So I'm hoping that you will agree to that further extension, and we'll bring it back in at the end of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Any quick questions to Lorraine? No. Graham, do you want to move?
Yeah, happy to propose the recommendation. No issues, thanks.
Councillor Law, Fiona?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Any comments? Craig, Councillor Holden?
Thanks, Provost. I think this is a good thing. Because I want to thank the officers, because that was obviously the author of the original motion to council, which resulted in the request for a quality impact assessment on the current school transport policies to be investigated and to report back to council. So I was contacted and informed of a delay. It's a good thing, because it shows that there's a lot, when there was a need for it, and I know there was some doubts about whether there was even the impression that we had, and we don't. I got that very early doors from legal as well, confirmation of the fact, and it's good that we're looking at it. And it's good that we're taking our time, and I've not got a problem with the fact that it couldn't come back with the deadline, because I'd rather do it right than you know, come up here with a half-baked policy that says, well, these are some of the issues. That creates more questions than answers. So I'm grateful for the process. Absolutely. I'd just like to say that in future, there's other issues, some things I think we didn't particularly live up to our obligations that work towards council decisions, and we could learn, and let's just be honest, low capacity issues. With some complex legal issues in association with this policies. I accept that as well. So we're taking the time to look at it, to think about it, and to come back with a considered and a comprehensive response, which will allow us as elected members to take an informed position on whether or not we want to make any changes to our existing policies, or whether we're comfortable with them. And I'm grateful for that.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Any other comments? No. Graham, do you want to sum up? No. So I take it it's agreed that the paper will come back to us on the 26th of June 2025. Agreed. On to item 9, page 51, the drugs and alcohol policy pilot review. We've got Ali from HR to speak to this paper.
Thank you, Provost, and good morning, councillors. The report presented today provides Council with an update on the pilot implementation of the drugs and alcohol policy, including with cause testing, and seeks approval of the drugs and alcohol policy itself. Members will recall that in February 2023, Council approved, following amendment to the original paper, a 15-month pilot period for the drugs and alcohol policy, specifically designed to give officers time to engage staff and managers on the policy itself, provide training, and to assess the impact of with cause testing. The paper presented today represents the 12-month report on this pilot as agreed by Council. Following the approval of the pilot, officers undertook training and engagement with staff, including alcohol awareness sessions and training specifically for managers around managing alcohol and drugs in the workplace. In addition, drop-in sessions were arranged at different locations across the county, allowing managers the opportunity to see testing equipment and to aid their understanding of the policy and process. With specific regard to voluntary with cause testing during the pilot, this was undertaken on 3 employees, the details of which are found at section 3.8 of the report. There's a limit to the detail that obviously we can go into that to ensure the anonymity of the individuals involved. On each of these occasions, testing was entered into voluntarily, as is part of the process, with trade union representatives present at 2 of the tests, the third of which declined trade union representation at the time of testing. Looking more widely, the future ongoing costs are outlined at section 3.11 of the report. Now, of note is the relatively low ongoing running costs of with cause testing, which is, we anticipate, approximately £535 per annum. When viewed as a preventative measure against potential safety incidents involving alcohol and drugs, and the resultant investigations and HR processes which would need to be undertaken by officers, should with cause testing not be undertaken, that being across HR, health and safety and wider council services, with cause testing could be used as a potential saving to the council, as well as representing a positive return on investment in terms of the safety culture of the organisation. Officers do recognise, however, that the number of tests conducted within the pilot was low, with feedback from the Joint Trade Union Committee specifically noting that, and I quote here, if there is no evidence that categorically proves safety has improved because of drug testing, then this element of the policy should be removed because it is an unnecessary procedure, using valuable resources at a time of significant financial pressure and opens the employer to needless legal risks for no benefit. However, Despite this, officers are recommending that the policy be approved in full today, so as to implement with-cause testing as an ongoing deterrent against future incidents involving drugs and alcohol. In addition, approval of the policy will further bolster the generative and positive workplace safety culture of the Council, and ensures that we can meet our duty of care to our employees by providing appropriate support to those who need it. In this regard, we also have a range of supports in place to ensure that where employees are identified as experiencing issues with drugs and alcohol, we can deal with these in a supportive and timely manner. Lastly, in approving this policy in full, members would be aligning Clackmannanshire Council with other Scottish local authorities who have already implemented similar policies which provide for with-cause testing, including Aberdeen City, Aberdeenshire, Dumfries and Galloway, East Ayrshire, Inverclyde, North Lanarkshire, Scottish Borders and Stirling councils. I am happy, alongside the Strategic Director for Partnership and Performance and the Council's Health and Safety Manager, to take any questions you may have on the paper. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ali. So, Councillor Holden, Craig, first.
I actually didn't raise my hand, I've scratched my chin.
Sorry. Councillor Coyne then, Dennis.
Yeah, Alistair, page 52, 3.4, 3.5. Can you put into context for me the numbers of 125 and 18, and also a little clarification? It says here the toolbox talk has been received by. Does that mean that only 125 people were sent it, or only 125 people asked for it? And the second point, a further 18 employees have also attended. Was that voluntarily, or were they instructed to do so?
If you don't mind on the specific question, we bring in Shoreditch to help with that answer.
So the toolbox talk was sent out to all managers, and all managers were requested to deliver it to their staff. The recording mechanism for that is that there is a sheet that managers are supposed to send back to our team, which then gets recorded. So 125 is a number that we have recorded. There may well be others who have received the toolbox talk, but we have no record of that, so we can't prove that anywhere. In terms of the overdose awareness training, that was a voluntary training course for specific staff, and it's generally targeted at areas where they might be supporting service users who may experience drug overdose and therefore have the tools available to assist those individuals.
So I could read into that last point, these were people who perhaps thought they might benefit from a little bit of support in this area, right? And the managers were sent out the toolbox talks and asked to distribute those, and were they asked to report back to you what the uptake was?
Yes, that is part of the toolbox process that's been established over a number of different policies. It's sent out to all managers. The uptake, as I say, can vary, but that is the process that's supposed to follow.
So what percentage of the response to the 125 represent?
Of the potential response, I should say.
That would be approximately 4.5%.
Thanks. Moving on.
Yeah, moving on to 3.5, interesting, the last question, talking about the sessions here. Feedback from these sessions was positive, with employees in several areas advocating for random testing to be introduced, albeit on an anecdotal basis. What does that mean? I know what anecdotal means, but in this context, what does that mean?
So certainly I can comment on the context where I was at one of the road shows and was demonstrating what was happening and explaining the changes. And there were several employees who were there said, well, why aren't we doing random testing? That's what I would be expecting as an employee of the council. So it was those kind of comments that we're reflecting on. But that wasn't recorded to say, there were 6 people at this training course or 3 people at that training course. It was just that feedback that we got when we were out doing the roadshows.
And do you feel that somewhat flies in the face of the opposition mentioned in the email that came round? But it would be interesting to know how significant those numbers were, because obviously it's done on a majority basis.
Absolutely, and if we did roadshows to every single employee, we might be able to gather that information. We haven't been able to get to absolutely every employee to get that kind of information together.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Earl and then Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My question is on the cost, Ali. You say it's significantly lower than the cost of management time. How much was that management? Have you had a calculation of that management time? And my second part of the question, how does that compare to the other 11 authorities that you're talking about in paragraph 3.15?
Thanks, Councillor. I can probably answer both questions in one, and that is difficult to calculate. But what I will go back to is, in the scenario where with cause testing is undertaken, it is likely that we can support or come to a conclusion of that potential incident or scenario a lot quicker than what we would do if we were to follow a grievance process through in full, which, as I said in my preamble, may involve HR business partners, investigating officers, the appointment of a chair for a grievance appeal hearing, etc., depending on the nuances of the different cases. I think we need to look, though, at this policy and process, not from the scope necessarily of savings. The focus needs to be on the preventative nature of the process as it is presented. And the preventative nature is going to result in us seeing benefits, more tangible benefits in terms of the safety culture of the organisation, and that's where it should be seen from. And I mean the safety culture as in we are looking to try and prevent these incidents happening in the first place, so we are not reacting, we are upstream of them. And we can take action in a proactive manner that not only supports employees where these issues are seen to be happening, but we can do so in a way that's providing that positive workplace culture and the duty of care that we all owe to our employees under the Health and Safety at Work Act as well. This is one feather in the cap or range of supports from health and safety that is of benefit to the council and will be in the future.
Maybe Councillor Quinn. Sorry, just to follow up on that in terms of the cost. So the implementation of the pilot, the most significant cost has already been paid out. The ongoing cost is £535 a year. So base that against the time that Alistair was indicating through formal processes, it's a very insignificant cost going forward. We've already made the cost of purchasing the equipment, the kit, etc. So that cost has already been met.
The second part of my question would refer to the other authorities at 3.15. Sure.
Yeah, I don't have detailed knowledge of exactly what's been implemented in all the authorities that have this testing programme in place. But the ones that I am aware of, we have adopted a slightly different approach, whereby it's an external party that conducts the testing. And certainly the last time I was aware of any figures, it was about £200 per test for that. So you can see it would build up quite a significant cost, even for the relatively low numbers of tests that we've carried out. The approach that we took was to do a much simpler test that can be done in-house. And so that's the approach that we've taken because we thought it would be far more cost effective.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Brian, Councillor Quinn. Thanks. Can you explain a little bit more about this time saving, please? So, how does it take 2 hours time to do a test rather than 8 hours when we don't do a test time? And you can just break that down for us a little bit more. Thanks.
I think I'll bring in Shonik on the technical matters here again.
So what we have found is that where we don't have a test, well, in most cases there has to be a disciplinary process or some kind of discussion process with the employees to identify what is actually going on. What we found is where there is a test there, that process is significantly shortened. You still have to ask the question, have you taken something, but because you've got that result there, it's a lot simpler. Whereas if you don't have that test there's a lot more people need to be involved in the process and it takes far longer. That's a simple statement that in terms of time it's there.
Yeah, but why is my question. Because the test doesn't prove they've not taken anything. It just proves they've not got in the system the things that we're testing for, which isn't everything. So how does that negate the need for the usual process if we prove that, you know, they're not an alcohol or whatever it is?
It doesn't negate the process, it just shortens it because people, you don't have the he said, she said scenarios that take so long to get to the bottom of. You have evidence there that's much harder for the employee to argue against.
Okay, fair enough. It was mentioned when we were introducing the paper there about the trade unions' point about safety. So I'm assuming then we've run it for 12 months now. We should have figures on safety, which none of them have been provided, about accidents or anything like that. So have we seen a significant reduction in accidents related to substance use or anything like that? Is there any evidence? Because that was the kind of evidence I was expecting to get after a 12-month review, and we were told we're using this to get evidence. All the evidence you've given me is that it costs £535 a year and it saves 6 hours of time for a couple of managers. I was expecting figures on safety because, as you rightly made the point, it's not about time saving things, it's about safety. So can you show me that it's safer, and why has this not been included in the paper?
I think the difficulty is how do you report on the accidents that haven't happened, because you don't know that they've not happened because they've not been reported. So it's difficult to kind of quantify that in any meaningful way. Certainly, if you look at our accident stats, the pattern of it, although the total number is going up, the pattern is changing. There never were huge numbers of incidents that we could definitely say were alcohol and drug related. What we do know is that where they do happen, they tend to be fairly significant. But it's difficult because up until this point, we haven't had the tools to be able to say that person was definitely under the influence, therefore that accident was attributed to a drugs and alcohol issue.
Just kind of one more question. Has there been any accidents that have happened that we've not picked up on as a result of this? You know, we changed the policy, we're hoping to prevent more stuff. Are there any accidents that have happened that have slipped through the net of our kind of policy and procedure here?
Right, Sean's coming on that one, but just to revert back to your previous point as well in terms of evidence. So there are a number of articles out there in terms of the Health and Safety Executive indicating that with cause testing can be a particularly effective safety critical roles and helps prevent accidents. So it's the prevention that we're looking for. Irish Magazine indicate that with cause testing is a proven to reduce risk associated with drugs and alcohol misuse. The Institute of Occupational Health, the IOH, emphasised that with cause testing helps determine contributing factors to workplace incidents and prevents future occurrences. And it's a proactive measure to ensure a safer working environment by addressing substance misuse promptly. And the BMA have shown that alcohol use increases the risk of problems in the workplace, such as absenteeism, presenteeism, inappropriate behaviour, and use of alcohol or illicit drugs can impair a person's performance at work through poor decision making and impaired reaction time, causing lost productivity. So one of the aspects from the last discussion that we had regarding the introduction of the policy, and we had, again, going back anecdotally, you recall the Chief Executive had indicated we were getting lots of staff coming to officers, to the Chief Executive, indicating they had suspicions of staff who may have been under the influence, etc. We're not getting that kind of engagement now from staff. So the introduction, again, or anecdotally, may be seen as a deterrent, which leads to that reduction in alcohol or drugs consumption, which in itself leads to a reduction in accidents. There'll always be something we miss. You're always dependent on a manager who's looking at the signs or the symptoms and asking for that intervention. So there may be, I'm aware of functional alcoholics, for example, who may present at work absolutely fine and able to undertake their job. But if a manager is of the view that they believe that someone has presented to work under the influence, we have measures and balances in there that allow the testing and then hopefully prevent an accident. So that prevention is encouragement.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that a bit. But yeah, you tell me lots of evidence from other places, but the whole point of this trial was to get evidence from our council here. And I don't feel like we've got that evidence. So, as I said before, we can't measure the accidents that didn't happen, but we can measure the accidents that did happen. So we must have figures on accidents that happened throughout the years, and we must have figures from the last year of the accidents that happened. And surely we can see if the trend is changing or is moving directions.
Brian, you're kind of
do we have
debate, can you put it in a question, or
do we have figures on? Because I'm just acknowledging what's been said there, that you're saying we can't measure accidents that didn't happen, but we can measure accidents do happen. So why have we not been given figures? And do we have figures then on the accidents that have happened? And has there been any movement in the last year since we introduced this? Because that was really what this trial was all about. Do we have those, anything you can give us light on that? Thanks.
I think the simple answer is we don't have these figures today, Councillor, but I think it comes back to Chris's point that this is a preventative measure that we're looking to try and approve today. And so what that means, just to reiterate what Chris has already said, is where those numbers are low, that in itself could be evidence that the process is working, that it is having demonstrable benefits for the organisation in terms of our safety culture, in terms of how people are addressing drugs and alcohol. But it is challenging to give those sort of specific figures. We don't wish to see an increase in the amounts of drug and alcohol related issues within the council. There are only 3 there, I think, within that. But that, to my mind, gives credence to that preventative measure that we're looking to try and take, and that we've taken throughout that policy basis.
Also, it could be added to that. So every accident that happens is recorded through a health and safety management system and will be investigated. And the causes of that, no field with any investigations taken from that. But since the pilot, we're not aware of any accidents that have been a direct result of alcohol or drugs misuse. So again, is it a deterrent or is it an awareness that staff aren't under the influence when they're coming to work? But we do thoroughly investigate accidents. But since the introduction of the pilot, there haven't been any.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Scott, Councillor Harrison, and then Councillor Holden.
Thanks, Paulus. So if we're seeing this as a deterrent, what do we do to help? If somebody approaches us as a council and says, I have an alcohol or drug addiction, what do we do? Because deterrents are fine, but I think we also have a responsibility to help people as they come forward.
I would absolutely agree with that. There is a specific intervention that we can get through our employee assistance programme, specifically designed to look at supporting people with drugs and alcohol issues. We can also refer on to other agencies that may be able to help. There is detail in the policy about managers looking at working patterns, for example, to see if there's things that can be done there to help. We would also support, attendance at relevant NHS clinics, for example, with time off given to attend those appointments. So absolutely, I agree that the support is important a part of the policy.
If I may, Councillor, as well, it's also part of that duty of care that we owe to our employees under that Health and Safety Act 1974 as well. It is the first step on that process to assisting staff. It is a voluntary process under this policy, but for some, it could be the first step of that process towards getting more formal support for any challenges that they are experiencing. So in that regard, again, it's the preventative measure, but it's also a supportive measure at the same time.
Thanks. Just a second one, a bit of a follow-up to Councillor Coyne's. So we reckon 125 toolbox talks is about 4% of the council. Do you think that's an acceptable number on something as important as a drug and alcohol policy change? Because I think that should have gone out to 100% of our council employees, frankly.
No, it's not an acceptable amount. And I think with that, I think we need to reflect that should the policy be approved in full today, the job is not done in terms of communicating and engaging with staff. There will be more that we need to do in terms of toolbox talks, communications, engagement with staff across the council, so that they understand the benefits of this process as we're describing today, both in terms of what it means in terms of the nuts and bolts of how it works for both managers and staff, but also why we're doing it, in terms of it's about the safety, improving the safety culture of our organisation as well. So the job is not done in that regard, and certainly should it be approved today, we will be looking at how we engage and communicate with staff going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holman.
Just ask a couple of questions. One, 3.7, sorry, 3.8, when it talks about the testing's been undertaken with just 3 employees at the moment. One person who's had a problem is returning to work was tested 4 times. What was the outcome of that then?
I will bring Sean into this shortly, but what I will say is there'll be a limit to what we can discuss on this because of the size of the council, the size of the teams, and trying to preserve the anonymity of the individuals involved. But I will bring Sean in, who should be able to provide a little more detail.
All the results of those tests were negative, and it was part of a supportive plan that was put in place as that employee was returning to work.
Right, so in essence, everyone looked happily about after that.
Yes,
that was a good outcome.
It was.
That's all I wanted to care. Right, and because it's addressed the point that Councillor Quinn's making, and also the point was made in the union representation. The second part of that, so you've got 2 other employees who were tested once each, presumably, is that right? Am I arithmetic right? Right, so how did that work out?
One employee decided voluntarily that they were resigning and not coming back. The other employee, there was a discussion and their employment was terminated.
So therein lies the problem, isn't it? Oh, okay. Right. What's the background of the 3 people who were tested? Was there any of them a chief executive or a director or a senior service manager? Or were they plumbers? Or were they joiners? Or were they administrative staff? What were they? What was the background?
Councillor Holden, we may be getting into the territory where we might be risking the anonymity of individuals that are involved.
How many employees have we got? How many employees have we got? How many employees have we got in each of these sections?
Yeah.
I
absolutely take your point, Councillor Holden. The difficulty is that some of the teams involved within the council, despite the size of the organisation, can be quite small. And so when going into the details...
You can use your ability to kind of summarise that a bit. What we're saying is, how about this? How many were trades backgrounds?
There was none from, it depends how you classify trades, but there was none from a strict trades background. The others came from a variety of different backgrounds. It wasn't just one area of the council that they've come from. And now, that's part.
So there's 3 cases, sorry, I'm asking you to help. So there's 3 cases?
Yeah.
All of which came from different professions within the council?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me what those professions were, without divulging any
Not really, without starting to divulge confidentiality.
It's not helpful, but that's fine. I understand why.
To try and answer the question, part of the reason that the health and safety team are the ones that are carrying out those tests is to make sure that there is that consistency of application right across the council. So it doesn't matter, if it was Nikki that was reported to us as being under the influence, we would go and test her in exactly the same way as we were doing for any other employee.
That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
That's why it's not in the report, because that's why I'm asking, because it should be in the report. That should be in there. There should be something in there that, sorry, I'll talk about that. My next question, so thanks. I get the difficulty in answering it. I do get it. I think it's really helpful from the point that's been raised by Councillor Quinn and others and the unions as well about trying to understand the context of this. Because there's 2 other points I've got. One in here is, this concerns me, 3.8. During the pilot, testing has been undertaken with 3 employees, one who was returning to work following an alcohol-related issue, 2 who presented as under the influence while at work. No 2 who appeared to present as under the influence while at work. That's why so I had to ask the question, what was the outcome of that? Were they positive or no? So there's that do you agree that that implies almost implies a foregone conclusion in terms of the interpretation? So somebody, I've met lots of people that appear to be drunk and they're not necessarily so. And I'm just wondering, whether or not the terminology should be a little bit more careful about that when someone appears to be under the influence, although that would be substantiated by the fact that they were found positive. I would accept or walked off the job. But here's the problem, you see, and I'm going to ask the question about this because I asked this question originally, Provost, about the voluntary aspect of it. They said, well, there's no, we can't force people to take the test. If you can't force people to take the test and people didn't take the test, then you can't be absolutely 100% sure that they were under the influence. And yet we've had one person who refused to take the test and described here as being, as being under the influence, not appearing to be under the influence, but as, do you know what I'm saying? The point I'm making, so can you clarify that for me?
So first of all, we've not had anybody refuse to take the test.
Sorry, I thought you'd said that.
No, we've not had anybody refuse to take a test.
Did you not? No, sorry. Did you not say that one person resigned on the spot?
After having had the test.
Right, that's fine.
Sorry, if that wasn't clear.
That wasn't clear, but that's fine. It's my problem. That's fine.
In terms of your wider question, the process that we go through is that a manager would have, or another colleague might have suspicions. There is then a process that we go through. We have a sort of checklist to say, do we believe that there are reasonable grounds here for the testing? It's not just a case of a manager phoning up and say, I think Jimmy's drunk and we go out and test them. There is a process that we go through to kind of verify that we believe that it is a justified concern before we even start testing.
Could you tell us what that is?
I can...
Sorry, Provost, you look uncomfortable with mine.
Well, I'm uncomfortable because I think we're delving into particular that could identify the employees, but I understand the direction of your...
What's the quick bit, Provost? I'm asking if you can outline what the process is for determining whether someone is a legitimate case for falling in this category. I don't think that's identifying anybody.
Councillor, yeah, we can give detail on that, and that's included within the policy at 6.2 where it discusses reasonable cause, and also at Appendix 1 of the policy as well, which is a guidance sheet for managers in terms of what possible signs of alcohol and drug misuse might be. Now, that is just in the policy and the appendices to the policy itself. What I should also say is that we have, as noted, we have provided training and roadshows to managers to help them with that process. So that element of just cause will be within there, but it's not just left for a manager just to interpret the policy. We've provided that training basis as well, the toolbox talks, as limited as they were, as we've discussed, but that sort of intervention has been provided for managers to assist with that assessment of just cause in those scenarios.
Who manages the managers? Who checks the checkers?
That's where my team would come in, and that's, as I say, why we've got that process of, we don't just jump as soon as a manager says this person needs testing. We go through that process of, what are the signs that you're seeing? Why are you making this accusation?
Sorry, I'm not being clear. My question was not clear enough. What I'm saying to you is, so you've got a process with a manager. This refers to manager's checklist and indicators and all this. Managers, right? So the manager says, Joe Bloggs looks to me as though he's under the influence, okay? Who checks the manager? Who monitors the manager? Who monitors those who monitor everybody else? Who monitors them? How do we know that a manager's not drunk? How do we know a manager's not drunk when he's making an assessment of an employee?
I wonder, Councillor, if we may be straying into hypotheticals that we can't answer in terms of who manages the manager of the manager. But what I think what's important in this regard is just the point that Shoreditch has made. The importance with this process is that there is a check and balance when there is a concern, valid concern raised by a manager. And that's where Shoreditch and the consistency that Shoreditch's team provides for.
But with respect, councillors here to ask questions. It's up to me to tell them what's important. If I feel it's important, I'll ask it. It's not to you to say to me what's not important. What's important to me is that this is fair. And I'm asking questions that relate to the issue of fairness. I'm asking who checks those who check. Right? And you could ask it, and theoretically, what's more dangerous? Somebody that's sitting in an office that earns £14 an hour
and making decisions that are not really going to impact on a great many people, or somebody that's in office making multi-million pound decisions that's going to impact upon everybody? Who checks them? That's all I'm asking. And there must be a process for it. You've got the manager's checklist. I understand that you've got these things that back these processes up. But who comes in and says to you, that manager is acting very, all he looks through, I could look through a checklist. I could come and say, I've met with a manager. It appears to me to be unreasonable. This could happen any day. They say about me. So what's the answer to that? Who checks these people?
So we have a line management structure. So obviously manager report to the manager, report to the director, and ultimately report up to the chief executive. So everyone has a responsibility in the council. We have a PRD process, constructive conversations where directors or line managers, if they feel that a manager has an issue. We have health and safety who are arriving on site, who are questioning the manager if they suspected him. We have a whistleblowing policy. If employees feel, I believe a manager may be under the influence themselves, who may feel feared to report that manager. So we have balances and processes in place for managers being checked as well. So every single person across the authority falls under this policy, and there are ways in which anyone from chief executive down to the caretaker, the janitor can be processed through this process, taken through this procedure. But our colleagues, health and safety, who are turning up, and if we felt the manager themselves was under the influence, would appropriately report that through. And again, as I say, the welfare checks that managers should be doing with them should hopefully pick up whatever areas of concern.
But in terms of the policy, final question, in terms of the policy itself refers to a hierarchy, if you like, of checklists, all of which are defined as a manager's checklist, a manager's process. What I'm saying to you is I'm asking you can understand why I'm asking you that question, because everybody could be drunk, everybody could have a drug problem, everybody could be a danger at work. So the policy must apply equally to everyone, whereas the wording of the policy would appear to imply it's hierarchical, and that's why I'm asking the question.
I take your point, absolutely, but for assurance, the policy does apply to all council.
Okay, thanks for that. Any further questions? No. Oh, sorry, Martha. I'm very sorry, Martha.
It's actually nothing to do with what was being spoken about. Darren has asked me to apologise on his behalf, but he said to leave the meeting.
No problem. Thanks for that. Will be noted to Councillor Coyne.
Thank you. If I understand things correctly, what we are about to be voting on is the decision to retain an element in the policy that allows for with cause testing. Now, with cause testing, my bad memory, that is a voluntary process, just knowing. That's great, thanks. Okay, so basically the three, what we're being asked to decide, I think, I'll try and phrase this as a question. There would be it seemed to me to be three drivers for the decision. One is if there's a legal obligation to put it in place, which there isn't, I don't think, under the health and safety regulations. If there is, let me know. The element would be council policy in its own internal health and safety policy. And the third one would be in terms of looking at it from an employee point of view. It's in their interests that accidents in the workplace are reduced, and they would be behind this idea. It's voluntary, it's not compulsory. So those would seem to me to be the three drivers. Have I missed any out?
No, I think that summarises it quite well in terms of the legal obligation, in terms of the internal process, yes, and yeah, thirdly for the employees as well. I think that's correct, unless you want to add this.
I was just going to say, so council had, so this policy has been up to council previously, but at that time council asked for an amendment to the paper for the introduction of a pilot. On conclusion of that, we're now taking the back for the ratification of the policy, the revised policy. There is an older policy, so if this policy is voted down, that previous policy would then be lifted up again. So we're asking council, following their request to have a pilot, on the outputs of that pilot to ratify and formalise the policy, which would include that with cost testing element.
Yes, next question would be, on the basis that there's limited evidence of a momentous change to the accident history in the council, would it therefore not be necessary to have some kind of idea of employee support then as a third third leg or the third driver that I mentioned?
So a bit of potted history, I suppose. So we've been engaging with our unions for over 7 years on this policy. With significant input from the Chief Executive at one point. The original policy that was originally developed was random testing. And we've moved significantly from the officer perspective in introducing the with-cause testing and then with-cause testing on a voluntary basis. Our unions are very, very clear. They will not support any form of testing. The STUC do not support any form of testing. We could have a pilot that runs for 10 years and have 100 people, have 5 people. Our unions will not be supportive of the policy with regards. They're not supportive of the policy, but supportive of the testing element of it. And that's the aspect. So we have engaged significantly over the years. In fact, you recall at the tripartite back in March 2024, the unions had raised an issue that we hadn't done anything, that the pilot should be dropped. But we'd been using that period of 12 months to do the education piece, the awareness training, the training element of it. And the unions were made aware of, on the 1st of April 2024 that the pilot would be commencing at that point. So we've always had strong opposition from our unions with the introduction of with-cause testing, of any form of testing, and I don't think that position is going to change.
With respect to the trade unions, this is a matter for a voluntary decision from any one employee who's caught up in this. I don't think that's anything to do with the trade unions. That to me should be a free vote across the entire employee base. I don't think the union's opinion is important in this case, since it's not mandatory. It's voluntary. And I think evidence from your customer base, if you like, or your employee base, that they're in favour of this for their own safety would be enough to compel me. Do you not think that's a reasonable position to take?
I agree with your position. It'd be difficult. I mean, you would ask to do a staff question, health and safety questionnaire. We've had very limited uptake in the last staff survey. The potentially is if you do that, you're more likely to get a response of people who are not in favour of it. So it's I do agree with the position you're coming from, but I think it'd be difficult to get one way or the other whether that would sway in any way in relation to the decision of council and the implementation of the policy, which in itself will probably require an amendment to the paper.
I think we kind of strayed into debate, but have you finished with your questions? Yes, thank you. Councillor Law.
No, I'm pointing Nikki towards Nikki.
Nikki, you were wanting to come in.
Thank you, and thanks for doing it before we moved on from Councillor Coyne's questions, because I just wanted to pick up on a point. Obviously, paragraph 3.8 had quite a lot of attention. I would just make the point that I completely accept that seems like it is a relatively small sample size, but given the answers that Shonich provided earlier, where the testing has taken place, 2 out of 3 of those members of staff are no longer with the council, having received, the outcome of the testing. I suppose from my point of view, thinking from the employer point of view, any single accident has the potential to cause harm to both other members of staff and the public, and that can have really significant consequences, both in terms of people's lives and the financial impacts on the council. So I think we should probably bear that in mind, albeit the small sample size. That 2 out of 3 is not an insignificant finding from my point of view, because any one of those could have resulted in a serious situation for the council or individuals. I just want to make that point, because I do accept it that on the face of it, it's easy to dismiss that because of the relatively small numbers of people involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'll now turn to Councillor Law for that to move the paper.
Thanks. A number of years ago, I worked beside somebody who I believed was under the influence. My main issue was their safety. I was really worried about them to the point if I knew that they drove a vehicle, I would have phoned the police because I was that worried about I was also worried about the safety of myself and other colleagues because the person could be quite volatile, to the point where people avoided asking them things because they were worried about how they would react. I did raise this with my manager, and I also spoke to the person because I wanted them to know that I did it through a place of that I was worried about their safety, and I wanted, you know, something to happen or to recognise. So talk about safety, I just think it is that also that we need to remember it is not just about like if somebody is using a vehicle or heavy machinery, it is also the safety of that person, it's the safety of the colleagues around, and it can really affect kind of your working environment. So I was just say I welcome this policy, and I think the tool about the voluntary testing is another kind of tool on that box, and as we said, it's all about preventative. Hopefully it will help people. As we said, there is support there to get that support if they need it. But I think that it is good that it is there, and as I say, having been in a position where I worked somewhere where I wasn't aware of the policy, there wasn't really anything there to help other people in that situation. I think this is, you know, it is a step in that it is not just a kind of punitive, it is about trying to help people that are in these situations, because you want people to come forward if they do have an issue so that they can get help, because these people are also, you know, valuable employees, and we need to, as we said, there's those programs that can help them, and we want to keep them employed because they are valued, and also the way that we treat our staff is also representative of how we treat our residents, because there's lots of people within Clackmannanshire who have addiction issues. So, you know, we need to deal with it here and show a kind of empathy and helping towards people who have addiction. So I welcome this policy coming forward.
Okay, Wendy, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm pleased to second this paper as well. I think as a council we have a duty of care to employees and our constituents to provide safe services. I appreciate sort of the concerns raised by the council and supportive of unions, but I think our duty of care to safeguards supersedes that, and the implications, as Nikki said, could be sort of catastrophic. I think we all wish that we lived in a society that we didn't need this policy, but alcohol and drug use is part of our system, and we have to ensure prevention and safeguarding. So I second this paper.
I'm supportive of the principle as well. I must say, I've always have been. It's a tested part I have a problem with. I have a real problem with it. I also can't approve paper because I couldn't approve the policy. I know I'd have a joke with some of my colleagues about the time I take to ask questions and why I'm doing it, but you kind of have got a reason sometimes, and the reason why I'm asking it is I've read the policy, promised, and there's gaps in it. Even in 2 years, and it's surprising because there is gaps in it, and it's a term that I was asking a lot of questions about terminology about managers auditing, managers checklist. Okay, well, who checks them? That's important to know. It's important to know that everybody's been treated fairly. I could have articulated my questions better around the background. What I was meaning was, is it clerical backgrounds? Is it manual backgrounds? Is it, is a certain section of the workforce that's being targeted? And what would be the prejudices that would lead to that, to make people drink or consume drugs in manual professions than they do in professions such as, I don't know, senior managers or directors. So there's questions around that. Also some aspects of the policy as well. Think about home working. Think about home working in the context of that. What damage does a person do if they're sitting in an office making decisions when they're under the influence of alcohol? What difference does it make if they're sitting making decisions when they're in the comfort of their own home? But the policy for me doesn't quite address that. When I've looked at it, I could be wrong, it's my reading of it. And it's the terminology through it as well, which implies that there is a hierarchical approach towards this, which I think is unhelpful. I've not really changed my mind at all on the testing element of it, because obviously you've got the choice element of it there. Who in their right mind would agree to take a test? Who would agree to that? It prejudices their whole position on everything. You know, and I would, and the unions have said it in the past, they would advise all employees not to take the test, to refuse the test. That is the only sensible way to do it, from a personal perspective, in terms of human rights perspective, in terms of your whole future as an employee, whatever. That is the correct thing to do. You're not admitting guilt by not taking it. So there's all of these bits here, but the policy does cause me concern. I mean, I can give you an example, I'll give the members an example. I was reading again today, and there may be some elements in it, I hope I can find it. 3 point something that was around, which caused me some concerns. I can't find it, but there's an element in the policy that's on about people. It talks about turning up to your work, being at work, being a danger while you're at work, but you're at work and you're at home. The chief executive's at work now, she's not here. Do you know, so the policy has to reflect that. I'm not sure it does. I'm reading all that, I think there's gaps in that. Equally, it might cause you some problems when it comes to actually taking forward a case against an employee where the terminology of the policy doesn't cover their circumstances. You're sitting in the house having consumed half a bottle of whiskey. Should be exactly the same as if you're sitting in an office having consumed half a bottle of whiskey. I don't think the policy allows for that. So because of the testing element of it, and because of what I think we could be doing reviewing the policy again. And I'm not trying to avoid the issue, kick the can down the road. I think we could be doing, within the context of home working and the different set of circumstances in which we'll all operate. I think we could perhaps do a further review of the policy now as well, specifically, rather than just this pilot project element of it. So for those reasons, I'm not going to support it.
But you cannot propose an amendment and then just direct negative.
I'll direct negative.
Brian, Councillor Quinn. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've got some nice stories about how we've stopped things happening, but the thing is, the people were flagged because they appeared to be impaired in some way or under the influence. And if it wasn't testing, they still wouldn't have been allowed to go back to work. So the testing didn't really stop the accidents happening. What stopped the accidents happening is people observing them, looking at their performance, their judgment, their behaviour, all these kind of things. Because we have to have these things in place in order to test them in the first place. So we're removing them from their work before we've done the testing. So if the testing didn't exist, we still would have removed them from their work. So there would have been there's no less danger, there's no less accidents. And I think the whole thing about time and cost, it's all minimal. It's not part of the argument as far as I'm concerned. A few £100 here, a couple of hours there doesn't make any difference. But I do remember when we first voted on this policy, one point is, we needed evidence. And I remember Councillor Lindsay, he's saying that's the point of the trial, is to get the evidence. We've had the trial, we don't have the evidence. There is no evidence that we are safer now and we have less accidents now than when we introduced this policy. And for that reason, I have to agree with the position of the trade union, and I'm not going to support the paper. Thank you.
Scott, Councillor Harrison.
Yeah, I think there's a flip side to that. There's a flip side to that, so those 3 people have been identified as coming to work impaired by someone, might not have been their manager, might have been their manager. What if nobody identified that they were impaired and they went about their work, or they had been found that day and they were just removed from work and nothing happens from it, and they come back the next day and they're in a similar condition, but there's no testing being done the previous day, they come back to work the following day in the same sort of situation. Nobody identifies that they're impaired and they go to work and they hurt themselves. There's a flip side to that. So the fact that there's no evidence, you're saying, is a good thing. There's a total. I'm going to support it, and I'm going to support it because I've seen what can happen when people turn up to work impaired, and a deterrent's great. I think there are other things in place that can support somebody if somebody comes forward, if an individual comes forward and they say that they've got an alcohol or drug dependency. I like that. I think that is every bit as important, probably more so than having the testing in place. I get Councillor Holden's point about it talks about managerial levels. Everybody's got a manager. So whether you're at the lowest level in an organisation or the highest level in an organisation, at some point you will have a manager. So I think the wording of line manager, I think everybody's got a line manager. So I don't see the point in that. So yeah, I'm going to support the paper.
Okay. Councillor Rennie, Janine.
Yeah, just a bit like Fiona, and I'm going to change a bit of this story really just because I want to protect confidentiality, but I used to work in a drug and alcohol service. And obviously one of the things was we had a lot of people who had lived experience who were working in that service. So it was very critical and important that we made sure everybody was okay. And there was a scenario for somebody who was in a management position who it had been noticed for a while, but there was no way of addressing it really. You know, we'd asked, it had been denied, that kind of thing, and eventually there was an assault within the organisation. That person then later was glad that that had happened because I kept in touch, because they got the appropriate support and help that they needed to ensure that they could resolve their life circumstances. So it was incredibly important for them to do that, and they were in a senior position. And I do believe that, you know, to be able to have that evidence that somebody has takes away that dubiety where somebody might say over and over again to you, no, obviously, I'm not. Then you've got to take it down a disciplinary route. It's horrible for everybody, including the person involved. And it also avoids any kind of risk like the situation that I'm talking about. So while I take on board points that colleagues have made, I'm very keen to support this paper because I've seen what can happen when something's not taken forward and the significant risk to others within the service. So I think, or services, so for that reason I'm going to support the paper.
Thanks. I mean, even if you accept Councillor Quinn's point that that process has already started when someone is being, this issue is being addressed on an individual, the process has started. But the voluntary testing is a way of nipping that in the bud very quickly. So it should shorten the process, you would think. And I also feel that the advice that has been suggested that the trade unions would give, that everyone should refuse the test, all that achieves is to cover up the guilty. It hides the guilty. I don't see the point of that. I think everyone's got the opportunity here to solve the problem at an early stage by agreeing to voluntary testing. I don't think there's a problem with this at all. I'm quite behind it.
Okay. Anyone else want to make a comment on the paper? Martha, Councillor Benny.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I tend to agree that we do need this, basically because it's actually now came up. If it never came up, it wouldn't be an issue. But now it's actually in situ, if you like. You're going to have a situation where everybody has got to be clear on what they can do and what they can't do. And if you're driving a van, you don't sit with a can of lager in your hand and drink it going home. So I think we have to make sure that everybody who's in the workshop, in the work in our council, needs to be aware exactly of what the situation is. If they are kind of trying to bend the rules a bit and get some drink or whatever. And I think that would stop that, because then it would make sure that that people who are not doing the right thing and taking drink into the workforce, they would soon be found out about that, and hopefully things would sort getting better. So yeah, I agree with the motion. I agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Graham, Councillor.
Thanks, Donald. Yeah, I mean, look, aside from this, it's a sensitive issue, so I don't want to treat it, with such simplicity, but for me it's an absolute no-brainer. I think, do we not approve this policy today, and it's reported to the public, our constituents, the people that we've got a real duty of care to, that we've not accepted this policy today, I think they'd be up in arms. And question, why the hell have you not implemented this? It makes sense for all the reasons that have just been outlined, to support actually the individuals potentially involved in this, to give them clarity, to give them a clear position. Why would you not take the test? If I was in that position, I would absolutely take the test to provide that clarity. So I think there's a couple of things just that were highlighted again. You know, that the kind of the line management point as well, and point 4 in the policy really outlines. You know, it's all individuals. You know, all these bullets are all individuals have responsibility to. All employees have a responsibility to report any situation. I do get the point about managers and whatnot, but you know, for me, completely reassured in terms of the questions that it encompasses everybody, and for that reason, I don't think it has to have a line in there because it is all-encompassing in terms of all employees. In terms of the evidence point, it's a small amount of evidence, but that doesn't mean we don't regard it. Like, it's still, for me, it's significant. You know, so the evidence is small, but it's significant. You know, and I'm connected to an individual that was affected by drink driving on the job, and you know, the ramifications are significant for that individual, and I'm not going to say too much, but and for those that were affected by it. So we have an absolute duty of care to our constituents out there. And as I say, I think there would be absolute outrage if we don't, you know, look to put these safeguards in place. So completely supportive of the policy. But yeah, the only other thing is just to address, you know, as Councillor Allison's point about, you know, ensuring through questioning was just ensuring that, you know, we go above and beyond to support those affected by drinking alcohol issues that they may have, and again comforted by the support, and would like to hear more about that going forward as well. So should further issues arise, so happy to support the policy on that basis.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Earl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This is something I was thinking one way I was definitely support it, and I wasn't going to support it. It's such a difficult and an emotive issue. But it does come down to a couple of issues. It comes down to the duty of care of all of health and safety, duty of care to all our employees. That's what it boils down to. We want to make sure that Jimmy Smith, when he leaves the house, has got a good chance of going back to his family when he finishes his work. We've got to look after everything that we have to do everything we possibly can to look after the health and safety of all our staff. I can't get a word out here, sorry about this. I think I understand where Craig's coming from, and that there are gaps in that. But surely, having identified the gaps, it gives us the opportunity to deal with that, plug the gaps once we have the policy in place. We can't keep kicking it down the road, because as Graham says there, the public out there, they'll be thinking that we have the policies in place to ensure safety. And it's going to look like we're actually not doing our duty by not approving this policy. It is a difficult issue, but I'm going to support the policy.
Thanks, Kenny. Wendy, I saw you put your hands up, but because you seconded the motion, I can't allow you back in under standing orders. So, any other? Councillor Coyne, have you been in before?
Yes, I have, but I maintain the right to add more if there's stuff that comes to mind. I was interested in the point that Councillor Holden made about working from home. I think there's a very valid point there. Working from home doesn't mean you're going to run anybody over or saw them in half, but you could make very bad decisions in terms of spending the council's money or the public money. So it is an area I think that needs to be addressed, and policy needs perhaps enhancement at some other stage. But I don't think that requirement makes it necessary for us to abandon this amendment to it, or to preserve this element of it. I think I'm just making the point that I think it's something that we need to look at in future. Is if homework is going to continue to be a considerable part of it, that there's some method for dealing with that very tricky issue of people making bad decisions in their own homes. That's all I want to say.
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Fiona, do you want to sum up? Pardon?
It's okay.
It's okay. Right. Roll call vote, please. You want a roll call vote, right? Okay. So The clerk will take us through the list, so those for the motions.
Thanks very much. So this is a roll call vote on the paper in relation to the drugs and alcohol policy. Councillor not back. Councillor Lindsay?
For the policy, I had to really think about that one.
Sorry, I should have made that clear. Councillor Balsillie?
For.
Councillor Benny? For. Councillor Law? For. I have a pencil malfunction, hold on. Councillor Hamilton? For. Councillor Rennie? For. Councillor Earl?
For.
Councillor Forson? For. Councillor Holden?
Against.
Councillor Quinn?
Against.
Councillor Harrison?
For.
Councillor Martin? For. Councillor Coyne?
For.
Thank you.
So the report is carried 11 for, 2 against. So we've agreed to approve the drug and alcohol policy. It introduces the permanent implementation of the with cause testing. So I'd just like to thank members for that debate. It's a very sensitive issue, and I think we addressed a number of issues. I'm conscious of the time now. We'd normally, we're almost coming up to we break for 10 minutes and hear the 3 motions, or whether you want to break for lunch. Any views on that? I would say 10 minutes and try and get the 3 motions. I would have to go if it was for lunch. Right. So I suggest we break for 10-minute comfort break. The only where we'll hear 3 motions, those of you that haven't had the emergency last-minute motion that was sent out last night, there are paper copies available. So thank you. See you in 10 minutes' time, which will be at 12:30. Yeah. 25 to 1.